It all happened when we were sitting at the reception desk at our wedding. I've come here to get my compensation for the affair. Huh? Both John and I were literally dumbfounded. But what surprised me even more was the fact that John had indeed cheated. Damn! I thought I'd never get caught. And he was justifying it, making it impossible to have a proper conversation. Do you really think you have any appeal as a woman? I married you because you can cook well and you have a body that looks like it can bear healthy children. Stop kidding around! I had reached my limit and slapped John right across the face. Until now, no matter how rude John was, I had always got through it with a smile and a joke. But this time, I couldn't let it slide. I swore to myself that I wouldn't be satisfied until I had cornered him. On the long-awaited morning of our wedding, I was in the dressing room, wrapped in a pure white dress, secretly hoping that John would tell me, "Lily, you look beautiful." John had been high-spirited since the day before, genuinely looking forward to the wedding. I thought he would be pleased to see me looking different. In fact, I looked better than usual in the mirror, and both my parents and my in-laws praised me. I'm a bit on the chubby side and usually dress plainly. But today, I thought I should be allowed to enjoy being the star of the show. John and I are from the same university. When I was a freshman, he was a senior. I was a member of the broadcasting club, and that's how I met John, who was the captain of the sports team and a well-known figure on campus. Our relationship developed smoothly, and we submitted our marriage registration before our wedding, and we've been living together for the past 3 months. Living together made the wedding preparations more efficient. The wedding venue was about a 10-minute train ride from our house. It was a casual restaurant without any formality. The beautiful and stylish interior made it very popular for private parties. John entered the dressing room. I suppressed my excitement and asked, "Does the dress suit me?" Immediately, John broke into a wide smile and stroked my head. "You've still got a round belly, haven't you? Hope you'll give birth to a healthy baby." I was utterly dumbfounded. Even our parents frowned. "At least don't say that today." "Why?" "It's the truth. I even went on a diet to fit into this dress for the wedding, you know?" I forced a smile and patted my belly. In such moments, I feel bad inside, but I always try to brush it off with a joke. One of John's shortcomings is that once he gets too carried away, he can't stop himself. He was teasing and said, "Hey, your belly looks like a balloon." The bride is supposed to be the most beautiful woman on her wedding day. Stop it before you hurt Lily's feelings. John pretended not to know what he had done wrong, saying, "Well, a fat person is a fat person. I'm sorry for our son, he's always been childish. Even though you are younger, you are much more mature." There was no blame for my mother-in-law. "I don't mind. It's just his usual self." I flashed a grin and laid on the sarcasm as thick as I could. The two of us quickly pulled ourselves together and took our seats at the reception desk. We wanted a homey wedding and decided to greet the guests personally, bride and groom both. Sadly, most of my friends live on a distant island, where my parents' home is, so they couldn't make it. On the flip side, John had a lot of acquaintances attending. We were okay with the imbalance. My parents and I had made our peace with it. I saw this as a golden opportunity to meet many of John's friends and was actually looking forward to the greetings. John introduced each guest to me, one by one. Every single one of them seemed delighted to meet me, complimenting me with a "You look like a beautiful bride." There was one guest, in particular, that stood out, a woman named Natasha. She was an acquaintance from work, as I understood. She seemed to be in her 40s, but she had this actress-like aura, especially in her dress and her tall, slender figure. "Nice to meet you, Lily. I've always been under John's care," she greeted me. "Oh, is that so?" I was certainly overwhelmed by Natasha. "He's a looker, right? And she's got her stuff together at work. Quite a different story from someone else I know." She indeed had the aura of someone who's competent at her job. Her designer suit fitted her perfectly without being too flashy, and her makeup was flawless. John was looking at Natasha with a kind of admiration in his eyes that he never showed to me, and Natasha was gracefully accepting his attention. They exchanged words for quite a while. Right now, I'm a full-time housewife. But originally, I left my job because of John's wishes. He insisted that he wanted me to focus on our home. I had only been at my job for 2 years. Just when things were starting to get interesting, I felt pressured to resign. When I think about the unfinished business at my old job, I still feel a tug at my heartstrings. Looking at Natasha, who seemed so dazzling, made these feelings even stronger. This is wrong. Today's supposed to be about us. Our guests should leave having had a good time. I swallowed the anger rising inside me due to John's insensitive remark and kept up with the greetings. Then, a middle-aged man in a suit appeared. He had this impressive demeanor, almost like a distinguished actor. "Who's that gentleman over there?" I looked at John, but he seemed to be as clueless as I was. Maybe he wandered in by mistake. It's supposed to be a private event. Just as I was wondering how to handle this situation, the man spoke up. "I'm here to discuss the compensation for an affair." "Excuse me?" John and I were literally stunned. "I'm in this line of work." The man handed out his business card with a professional demeanor. It bore the name of a well-known company, and his job title was impressive. He was dressed in an expensive suit, and he carried himself with calm and composure. He didn't seem like he was making things up. "Are you John? Could you please break it off with my wife?" "Wait a minute, John and I are getting married today." I tried to calm the man down, but then I noticed John trembling beside me. "What are you talking about?" John managed to squeeze out those words, though his voice was clearly strained. "My wife should be here somewhere." "Don't play dumb, it won't get you anywhere."
Wait. Natasha and I aren't like that."
"Well, you've just admitted it yourself, haven't you? So, you're having an affair with my wife, Natasha, right?" I couldn't hide my shock.
"Natasha, you mean the woman we just greeted?"
"I believe so." "What did he say about Natasha?" "I heard it was work-related." "Actually, Natasha doesn't work." The man sighed deeply. "Let's change the place. Can we use the green room?" I asked my parents to handle the reception, and went ahead to the green room. The man, who introduced himself as Kyle, sat down on the sofa in the green room and started talking. It's a blatant lie that Natasha has anything work-related to do with John. I found out through her phone records that she met John on a dating site. My in-laws, who were already in the green room, exclaimed in surprise.
"We didn't know anything about this." "Don't make strange accusations, we could sue you for defamation."
But Kyle remained calm. "It seems that Natasha has been having an affair with John for 2 years. This time, I couldn't help raising my voice.
2 years ago. But we've been dating since our college days, isn't this some kind of mistake?"
The phone records show it clearly. "Actually, I've been very busy with work for the last few years, with lots of business trips and overtime. It seems that Natasha had the affair when I wasn't looking." Saying this, Kyle took an envelope out of his bag. Inside were printed screenshots of Natasha's smartphone and a couple of photos of her with John.
"This is definitely John in these photos, isn't it?"
My parents gathered around, and we all checked the photos. I've been away from home a lot, I can't say I was blameless. But does that justify an affair? My parents muttered in unison, "No, it doesn't." More than anything, Kyle's demeanor was incredibly convincing. From a certain point, Natasha started wearing a new wristwatch. It was a very nice design, so I looked it up and found out it was part of a pair. I wondered who had the other one, and that's when my investigation began. Kyle had been investigating Natasha's actions during his breaks at work, and discovered that she frequently visited a certain station. It turned out to be the station closest to John's company. They were frequently meeting up after John finished work. Kyle then took out several photos from the envelope that appeared to be taken secretly. They clearly showed John and Natasha getting cozy in a bustling district.
You find it fun stalking like this? Don't take your frustrations out on me just because you can't keep your wife happy.
John's words were bold, but his voice was clearly trembling. The serial number on my wife's wristwatch is 118. What about your wristwatch? My parents restrained Kyle. I took off John's wristwatch and looked at the back of the dial. It's 118. This is a unique number in the world, right? Is it just a coincidence? How could that be? The evidence is all here. Why don't you just admit it and tell the truth? Suddenly, John raised his voice and started kicking the chairs in the green room.
Damn it! I thought I'd never get caught.
John, is what this man is saying true? Without looking at us, John answered while fiddling with his smartphone. There's just one thing that's different. I really do love Natasha. My in-laws whispered to each other in a confused tone. Today, I invited her because Natasha said she wanted to see Lily. At that moment, there was a knock on the green room door. Natasha came in from the guest room. Apparently, John had called her with his smartphone. John, you really do love me, don't you? Of course. My feelings are all for you, Natasha. Natasha and John hugged each other without any hesitation. This time, I couldn't just laugh it off as a joke. I carefully chose my words and asked John. Is it true that you've been cheating? Since Natasha got married, I reluctantly decided to marry you. We met a bit too late, didn't we? If I had met John sooner, I would have married him instead of ending up with such an uncool person. Kyle straightened up from the sofa and said with a resolute attitude.
See, they're so selfish, aren't they? I'm thinking about divorcing my wife. But I'm definitely going to demand a proper compensation for it.
At the word alimony, John and Natasha momentarily flinched.
John, did you know that Natasha was married when you started dating her?
Yeah, I found out a while after we met. But by then, we were already serious about each other. So, you were cheating on me too, weren't you? Unexpectedly, John shook his head. This isn't cheating. Because I have no feelings for you. Then why were you dating me? You were just for housekeeping. What does just for housekeeping mean? According to John, Natasha was his true love, but he needed someone to take care of the household and he wanted children, so he decided to marry me. It seemed he also judged that it would be a good cover to get married around this time for the company and society.
Do you really think you're attractive as a woman? I married you because you could cook a little and you seemed like you could bear strong children. I've had enough.
I reached my limit and slapped John. It was the first time I had ever hit someone. My right hand was tingling. At the same time, I felt disgusted, as if I had touched something filthy. Immediately, Kyle pulled out a wet wipe from his bag and handed it to me. Gratefully, I took it and wiped my hands thoroughly.
Ow! What the hell are you doing? You think you're in a position to defy me?
Even my mother-in-law couldn't stay silent at his words.
Have you always talked to Lily like that? No, Mom, I just lost my temper for a moment. Hey, Lily. I got scolded because of you. It's your fault.
There's no way that's true. Is it really true that you've been cheating for the past 2 years? John snorted triumphantly.
You can't trust what this guy says. Besides, the photos might be fake.
But judging from your interactions, it seems like you two really are dating, aren't you? That doesn't prove anything. What, do you have a video or something? I cut into the conversation with my usual surprised tone. I have it on video.
What?
Actually, I had secretly recorded today's situation in the dressing room with a hidden camera, planning to show it as a surprise later. I took out the camera from behind the flower arrangement in the room and checked the footage. From the part where John called me fat to where Kyle confronted him about the affair, everything was recorded. Unexpectedly turning into big news. But it should be sufficient evidence of the affair. Well done, Lily. And as for this guy. Lily, I am truly sorry. My in-laws both apologized to me together. You don't need to apologize. No, it's also our fault for spoiling John and letting him become like this. What can we do to make it up to you? John, you should apologize too.
No way. I haven't done anything wrong. Loving someone is a good thing, right? That's what Mom taught me.
That's not what I meant. Stop talking back and apologize to Lily right now.
It's okay. The foolish one here is John. John, Natasha, how about making a cheating confession in front of the camera?
Say cheese. I grinned and pointed the camera at them. I didn't expect to have this side of me. Hey, don't make that face. Just joke around and reply like you always do. This is my way of joking around. I can't overlook this. Then should we cancel the wedding? You're the one who's going to be embarrassed. I was at a loss for words. The party's start time had already passed. The guests must be waiting for our entrance at the venue. No, I should stick to my own decision. Fortunately, I had invited only a few guests. And they were all trusted close friends, so I could make up for it later. The one who really deserves pity here is John. He cares about appearances, so he invited his bosses from work and even his mentors from his college days. All right, I've got it. Let's start the wedding ceremony. However, just to let you know, we are going to change the flow a bit. I went out to the venue and took the microphone from the MC. John followed behind me. There was a round of applause from the audience. Thank you all for gathering here today. We were supposed to hold a wedding ceremony, but today's event has been changed to an emergency press conference. The venue suddenly became noisy with whispers and murmurs. With clear and articulate pronunciation, as if I had been trained in broadcasting, I continued. Today, we have a guest named Natasha, who is an acquaintance of John through work. But in reality, well, John? I turned the microphone towards John, like an interviewer. The people in the venue looked puzzled. John hesitated to speak, so I pressed him further. What is your real relationship with her? Voices from the audience also started to chime in, urging him to spill the beans already. Still, John seemed determined to remain silent. If this weren't in front of so many people, I would probably have been slapped hard. His fists were trembling under the table. No choice then. This was supposed to be a surprise for today, but please take a look at the hidden camera footage in the backstage. Everyone, please feel free to enjoy your drinks and meals. The large screen on the stage showed everything that had happened earlier, without missing a beat. As the video played, the audience watched intently, and gradually, voices of discontent started to rise. What's going on here? This is ridiculous. From the crowd, someone asked, you two are already living together, aren't you? We met in college, registered our marriage 3 months ago, and have been living together since, leading up to today. The venue was in an uproar. I thought I was marrying John out of love, but it seems I was utterly deceived. I adjusted my life for him, even quitting my job. What has my life been all about? I could hear John clicking his tongue in frustration. A different guest asked, Lily, what do you want to do now? The atmosphere had completely turned into that of a press conference. To be honest, this is all so sudden, I haven't had time to think it through. But I have my parents and trustworthy friends. I plan to figure things out together with them. This response led to a series of repeated questions from the crowd. John kept his head down, acting as if this had nothing to do with him. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you must have a lot of things you want to say, so I will leave the stage to him. You can grill him as much as you want. I put down the microphone and moved to the entrance of the venue, watching the scene unfold. John was left alone on the stage. Some young men in the audience, their tempers flaring, stood up and approached John, some even throwing drinks and food at him. All right, I get it. I was dating Natasha. Lily just wasn't enough for me. At that moment, my mother-in-law appeared, took the microphone, and addressed everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my foolish son. If it's not too much trouble, Please feel free to give him a piece of your mind." At her signal, people swarmed the stage and surrounded John. I couldn't see John anymore, but I imagined he was getting what he deserved. I thought about how expensive his rental suit was. Concerned about appearances, John had rented the best suit. With this commotion, he would surely have to pay for it. Satisfied after witnessing the chorus of boos from the audience, I returned to the backstage, quickly changed out of my dress, and left the rest to my parents. I also asked them to make sure John couldn't run away from the venue. I wanted to go home immediately. Ever since we started living together, John had been extremely opposed to me entering his room. He would get angry even if I tried to enter for cleaning or searching for something. I suspected there might be some evidence of his infidelity in his room. I asked Kyle to come with me, and we left the venue, heading for home. I was grateful that we had chosen a wedding venue close to our home. Soon we arrived at our house, and the search of John's room began. And then, one thing after another started to come out. Pictures of Natasha, and what seemed to be matching accessories and a pair of watches warranty card, and letters from Natasha, were all revealed. It even came to light that he was traveling with Natasha under the guise of business trips. Kyle meticulously photographed each of these items, and I put them in a cardboard box. It was almost like a police house search. Once all the evidence was gathered, I video called my mother-in-law. "Hi, how's everything going over there?" Bravely, she responded as if nothing was unusual. "The guests are getting heated, and John is still being cornered by everyone." "That's good to hear. Can you put your phone near the microphone so that my voice can be heard in the venue?" She quickly understood what I meant and did as I asked. "Hello, can you hear me? I'm the bride who was supposed to be the star today." I could sense the murmuring in the venue quieting down. "I know some of you might be angry. I have an important announcement to make." The venue went silent. "I will be divorcing John. Unfortunately, today's wedding turned out to be a disaster, but feel free to eat and drink as much as you like, and go home whenever you're ready. The cost will be fully charged to John."
Wait. I wasn't informed about this.
Kyle, who was standing next to me, signaled for me to pass the phone to him. "While we're on the subject, I have an announcement too. I'm also divorcing Natasha." The crowd murmured in surprise. "John, Natasha is an expensive woman. She doesn't do any housework, shops every week, and is absolutely incompetent at work. But now, both of you are free, so please, live happily ever after."
What am I supposed to do now?
You're free to do as you please. Good luck supporting Natasha's lifestyle.
I can't afford to support Natasha's lifestyle.
Natasha, who was nearby, cut in.
I'm not comfortable marrying John either.
Then you're all alone. Good riddance. Don't bother coming back home from today onwards. A round of applause erupted in the venue. Drunk guests' voices could be heard saying, "Good for her," and other cheers. Reluctantly, my mother-in-law agreed to let John stay at her house for a while. Warm messages like "It must have been tough, but you did well. We support you," started arriving on my phone from close friends who were at the venue. Afterwards, the guests reportedly indulged in a grand feast and drinks, and even made sure to take their wedding favors home with them before leaving. A few days after the tumultuous wedding, I was returning to my condo after shopping when I found John standing in front of my door, holding a disproportionately large bouquet of flowers. "I came to apologize, hoping you would forgive me. Can I come in?" "No." "Come on, don't be so stubborn. The wedding was just a moment of confusion, right?"
Absolutely not.
John, for some reason, had a smug smile on his face. He tried to hand me the huge bouquet of roses. "All women love flowers, right? Cheer up." But I had shopping bags in both hands and couldn't possibly accept the flowers. Not that I wanted to, even if my hands were free.
I'm sick of your assumptions and lack of consideration. Just go home.
John slowly moved closer to me. I felt threatened and turned my back on him to call my mother-in-law. The back and forth with John continued, and when he tried to force his way into the house with a spare key, my mother-in-law arrived just in time.
What the hell are you doing?
A shout from my usually refined mother-in-law, which I had never heard before, echoed throughout the area. Mom, why are you here? I came here thinking of making amends with Lily.
Don't talk nonsense and just disappear. Do not show your face in front of us ever again.
With that, my mother-in-law snatched John's bouquet and hit him square in the face with it. John's face was covered in small cuts from the rose thorns, and torn petals and leaves were scattered all over his body, making for a truly pitiful sight.
If you make any more strange moves, I'm calling the police. And don't you even think about coming back to our house.
He seemed genuinely scared by her words. John left with his tail between his legs.
I'm really sorry about this. Actually, I declared yesterday that I was severing parental ties with him. He left the house, but I never imagined he would be here.
While efficiently cleaning up the remains of the bouquet scattered on the floor, my mother-in-law apologized to me over and over again. You don't have to apologize. Please come in and have some tea.
No, I'm going to excuse myself now. If he comes near you again, don't hesitate to contact me. I will protect you, no matter what.
I was on the verge of tears from her words. I had an ally on my side. I decided to rely on her in times of trouble, and with that, we said our goodbyes. Later on, I managed to finalize the divorce, and I was relieved. I and Kyle each demanded $30,000 in damages from John. I didn't forget to claim the full $20,000 for the wedding expenses, including the gifts for the guests. The guests seemed to have enjoyed themselves quite a bit, and I couldn't help but laugh when I saw the hefty bill. John, unable to cover the costs with his salary alone, had moved to a cheap, small one-room apartment and was working tirelessly day and night. His boss had attended the wedding, which resulted in him losing face at work as well, but he couldn't afford to quit his job because he needed to make ends meet. Now, it seems like he's living every day in a very uncomfortable and awkward position. I heard from my mother-in-law that right after that incident, Natasha broke up with him. Apparently, Natasha had met another man through an online dating site and decided to date him instead. I can hardly imagine that things will go well for them. Especially since Natasha also has to pay us damages. I moved to a smaller, but nicer apartment. Moving was a hassle, but I decided it was risky to let John know where I lived. The evidence of John's affair is packed in a large cardboard box, sitting in a corner of my new home. So far, the alimony has been paid on time, but I haven't touched the money at all. Thanks to that, my savings have increased significantly. In the midst of all the commotion, a strange kind of fortune befell me. I lost about 15 pounds due to the stress of the divorce. Every time I looked in the mirror, I felt like I had been reborn. I went back to work, and through business contacts, I was able to meet a wonderful man. We are still dating, and every day is fulfilling. I have a good feeling that things will work out with my new partner this time.
Poor families from the bottom rung should leave. The meat will taste bad.
At a fancy steakhouse, when my daughter Jessica ordered cheaper meat, a banker at the next table started to pick on her. Her name is Julie Robinson, and we've had run-ins with her before. At the height of my anger, I decided to make a significant decision. My name is Michelle Stevens. I'm turning 50 this year and am a part-time working housewife. Due to being born to a father who loved collecting paintings, our family home was adorned with many artworks. I believe my dad often talked about paintings even during dinner, mentioning things like,
"The use of color in that painting is exceptional," or "the artist who drew that was struggling in life back then, and it reflects in the art."
Given the environment I grew up in, it wouldn't have been surprising if I had become an artist, but sadly, I had no talent in drawing. In my report cards, I always scored a C in art, and even now, I don't get the appeal of abstract paintings. However, my dad never discouraged me and told me to do what you love, so I studied economics in college. I met my current husband in college, and we got married when I was 25. A year after our marriage, Jessica was born. This life event led me to quit my job back then and fully focus on raising her. Once Jessica started elementary school and didn't need constant care, I started my part-time job. While my husband had a good income, I wanted to set an example for her by working as well. Fortunately, Jessica grew up well and is now a 24-year-old hardworking professional. She seems to face various challenges at work but is leading a lively life. Jessica loves steak, and about once a month, she, my husband, and I visit a fancy steakhouse. I also love meat, so I always look forward to our steak outings. When I lost both my parents around 2 years ago, going out for steak somewhat lightened my sorrow. Today as well, I've made lunch plans with Jessica to go to a fancy steakhouse. It's a weekday afternoon, but Jessica happened to have the day off, and I didn't have work either. My husband couldn't join us because he's on an extended business trip. But that's all right. Once he's back, we'll plan another outing with the three of us. As lunchtime approached, Jessica and I headed to our favorite steakhouse, and immediately started browsing the menu upon being seated. This restaurant is top tier, so the beef is, of course, delicious. However, their pork and chicken are equally tasty. The pork and chicken are also cheaper compared to beef, so we end up ordering them often. This time too, Jessica said, "I'll have the pork ribs and the juicy chicken, please." Of course, we didn't just order that, we also got some beef and rice. Soon after our orders started arriving, and Jessica and I eagerly began grilling. As we relished the meal, we finished the meat in no time. We thought of ordering some more. But then, from the table across the aisle, we heard a weird chuckling sound. Wondering what was going on, we turned to see a middle-aged, somewhat chubby woman giggling at us.
"Excuse me, is there a problem?"
I asked, only to have the woman laugh even more.
"Well, it's just funny. You come to such a fancy steak place and order cheap pork and chicken."
She had been observing what we were eating? It felt invasive and uncomfortable. What we chose to eat is our business.
We happen to like pork and chicken.
Though I found her very rude, I tried to ignore her and focused back on the menu. But the woman from the next table wouldn't stop bothering us. Pork and chicken, isn't that just bland? When there's delicious beef available, I can't understand why anyone would be so obsessed with pork and chicken.
Your meat is burning."
I pointed to the lady's table.
"Huh? Oh no, it really is."
Jessica quickly grabbed the tongs. On the grill, an expensive-looking piece of meat was charred black. Julie was making a face, probably thinking it was because she was bothering us. I totally believe this was Julie's fault, but after moving the meat to her plate, she glared at us sharply.
"It's because of you too. The best meat in this place is ruined. This was the most expensive one. What are you gonna do about it?"
What can we do? I thought.
"How about ordering a new piece?"
I suggested hesitantly, but that only made Julie angrier.
"It was your fault that the meat got ruined. Why should I have to pay out of pocket and order again?"
Julie's anger seemed to be escalating, and she finally said, "Get out of this restaurant."
"Hey, this is a high-end steakhouse, right? The only thing to order here is the prime beef. Doesn't matter if they have pork or chicken on the menu. The right choice is beef. People nibbling on pork and chicken like they're poor should probably just leave."
At her absurd reasoning, both Jessica and I were dumbfounded. Seeing our reactions, Julie continued to rant.
"Only people like me, who can afford to dine here twice a week, should be using this place. After all, I work at Blue Bank. I'm an elite."
Blue Bank? Blue Bank, a major bank, is where I have an account. But something else caught my attention. I felt like I had seen Julie at Blue Bank before.
"Poor people like you have no right to taste the meat of this restaurant. Come on, just leave."
As I watched Julie continue to rant, I finally remembered where I had seen her.
"Didn't you have a disagreement with me at a Blue Bank ATM recently?"
She seemed to recognize me as well and pointed, saying, "Ah, that annoying woman. The story dates back about a month ago." I stopped by Blue Bank to withdraw some money from the ATM. For some reason, the ATM, which should have been functional, wasn't working. The screen was pitch black and it wasn't working. As I was wondering what the issue was, a bank employee with a name tag reading Julie approached. It was the same woman.
Hey, what did you do? Did you break the ATM?
Julie seemed to think I had broken the ATM and frowned at me.
No, I didn't break it. It wasn't working from the start. I think there might be some issue with it.
I tried to explain, but Julie insisted that I had broken it.
Don't try to act like it wasn't your fault.
Just then, the branch manager, Jim, arrived and asked what the problem was. When I explained the situation, Jim immediately apologized.
I'm sorry. That ATM is out of order. But it seems the notice sign fell off. It wasn't your fault, and we apologize for accusing you. Julie, apologize.
Urged by Jim, Julie apologized, but she clearly looked displeased. Although her attitude was upsetting, I decided it wasn't worth making a fuss and left. I had almost forgotten about the incident with Julie, but here she was again. I briefly told Jessica about the previous incident, and she whispered, "I see." It was clear that, even if she didn't voice it, Jessica was taken aback by Julie's behavior. Seeing our reactions, Julie shouted, "Don't you dare look down on me, you poor people." By now, I could feel the stares of other customers. The staff was also looking over, unsure of how to intervene.
Please, keep your voice down. You're disturbing the other customers and the restaurant. Everyone's watching.
I tried to warn her. Julie, realizing she was drawing attention, muttered, "Oh, I'm sorry," and started eating again. However, when the attention shifted away, she audaciously sat at our table. She whispered, "Leave, you bottom-class poor family. The meat will taste bad. Until you leave, I'm gonna keep complaining in a low voice."
What?
I was getting frustrated. Julie was incredibly persistent. She seemed intent on bad-mouthing us until we left.
Mom, let's just leave. I've had enough to eat.
Jessica seemed to be annoyed and quickly stood up. She probably wasn't full yet, but her desire to distance herself from Julie must have prevailed. Realizing that Julie was not the kind of person to have a conversation with, I decided to give up on eating at this restaurant.
I get it. We'll go somewhere else.
Upon hearing that, Julie grinned at me.
Oh, finally got the hint? Gosh, poor people sure are slow to catch on.
Why do we have to leave because of someone like her? I wasn't gonna let this slide. I pulled out my phone, ready to retaliate.
I'm about to call Jim, the branch manager, and cancel a deposit of $3 billion. If you apologize right now, I might reconsider.
Hearing this, Julie's face turned to shock for a moment, then she chuckled.
What's this about a $3 billion deposit? There's no way someone content with pork and chicken could have that kind of money. Come up with a better lie.
Julie clearly didn't believe me. Her lack of customer awareness was glaringly evident, and I sighed.
All right, I'll call the branch manager. I'll step outside the restaurant to do so, but don't say I didn't warn you.
I took Jessica with me, settled the bill, and went outside. As I was about to make the call, Julie came out too.
This seems fun. I'll watch from here. You're probably not gonna call the branch manager, but some random guy, right? A setup? I can't wait to see who answers.
Annoyed by her taunting, I made the call. I dialed the number for Blue Bank and asked for Jim. Jim quickly came on the line, and when I explained the situation, he immediately apologized.
I'm so sorry. Julie has been incredibly rude. I'll make sure she doesn't bother you again, Ms. Michelle. We'll consider disciplinary actions against her. Please reconsider canceling the deposit? No, I can't trust a bank with employees like that. Being treated as poor just for eating pork and chicken is just too much. Plus, she treated me as a suspect regarding an ATM incident without any proof. If you let Julie continue, I feel it could lead to a major financial issue in the future. I'd like to cancel before that happens.
Jim was again heard apologizing, but then Julie snatched my phone and blurted out something unthinkable.
Who are you? Claiming to be the branch manager? Are you this poor woman's husband?
She genuinely believed she wasn't speaking with Jim. Sadly for her, she was indeed speaking to the real branch manager, Jim. After such disrespectful remarks, this wouldn't end well. From the other end, I heard Jim's angry voice shout, "Is that Julie speaking? I am Jim, the branch manager." Julie finally realized who she was talking to. Her face going pale.
Are you really the branch manager? I thought she was calling some random guy. I'm so sorry.
Julie kept apologizing over and over again. However, it was too late to apologize no matter how she tried. From the phone, you could hear the loud voice of Jim, the branch manager, and Julie's face went pale as if she were ill. Jim's voice was hard to hear at times, but the words come in immediately came through.
Yes. I'll pass the phone to Ms. Michelle now. I'm so sorry about that.
She then handed me the smartphone, saying, "Here you go, it's your phone call," with a courteous gesture. "Thanks," I replied. I took the phone and spoke with Jim again. He wanted me to apologize properly, so we headed to Blue Bank. All the while, Julie looked distraught and couldn't focus. When we arrived, Jim greeted us. We were led to a meeting room, and Julie was told to apologize. Without resistance, Julie said, "I am deeply sorry." She then sat down on a nearby chair, holding her head in despair. "Man, I was enjoying some fancy steak, and I didn't expect this. I shouldn't have played hooky." "Wait, you were playing hooky?" I asked in surprise. Seeing my reaction, Julie looked taken aback.
Well, not exactly playing hooky, I was just a bit tired.
She tried hard to make an excuse, but it was too late. Jim, with an awkward expression, explained,
"It's quite embarrassing, but Julie called in sick today due to a high fever. However, we found out from a call earlier that she was at a fancy steakhouse. In other words, she lied about being sick."
Come to think of it, it was a weekday afternoon. The bank was open for regular business hours. To use sickness as an excuse to eat fancy steak?
After being rude to a client and skipping work? I really can't trust you anymore,
I said in a sharp tone. Jim apologized again. And Julie kept apologizing, saying, "I'm so sorry." However, she then added, "But come on, a deposit of $3 billion? You can't blame me for being skeptical." Jim immediately pointed out.
Didn't I inform you about Ms. Michelle a long time ago? And yet, you didn't remember. This was your mistake, so stop complaining. Yes, I'm very sorry.
Julie's face showed regret as she apologized again. However, her demeanor didn't seem genuinely remorseful. It was evident she was merely apologizing because she was scolded.
That half-hearted apology is enough. But a deposit of $300 million does seem unreal, doesn't it? Let me explain. Actually, my father had a passion for collecting paintings, but he passed away a few years ago. I kept his paintings as a keepsake for a while, but unfortunately, I couldn't appreciate their true value. I decided to sell them to someone who'd cherish them more, and when I did, my account ballooned to $300 million. Is that even possible?
Julie was more shocked than convinced. I was equally surprised when I sold the paintings, wondering how they could fetch such a high price. I understood how she felt. I didn't want to give my father's treasured paintings to just anyone, so I had them professionally appraised and sold them for their rightful value. As a result, I ended up with an unbelievable sum. I sold the last painting about 3 months ago. I wondered about keeping such a massive amount idle, but between part-time jobs and house chores, I just left it in the blue bank. I've decided to close the account. I think my late father would advise against leaving so much money untouched. It's the money he left for me, so I don't want to keep it in an unreliable institution. Upon hearing this, Jessica nodded. I agree with my mom. Having someone like Julie involved with such a significant amount of money does naturally raise concerns. Hearing this, Jim looked resigned. Understood. We'll go ahead and cancel that for you. Later on, Julie will be dealt with strictly. Just when I thought everything was settled, Julie continued her pleas.
Please wait a minute. What's gonna happen to me? Please don't punish me. You're not gonna fire me, are you?
Stop causing a scene in front of the customer.
Miss Michelle, I'm terribly sorry. Please don't mind Julie's behavior.
Before I knew it, Jim stepped in, but Julie suddenly gripped my arm tightly.
Please, I beg you. Convince the manager not to penalize me. If my pay gets cut or I get fired, I'll be in big trouble. Truth be told, I have debts.
A bank worker with debts?
And yet you're eating at fancy steakhouses? Maybe start with some budgeting?
When I said this with a stern tone, Julie's face looked like she was about to cry.
Don't be so cold. Once I started living luxuriously, I couldn't stop. Hey, why not share some of your $300 million with me? Just $100,000 would do.
What an absurd request.
Why should I give you any money? I don't want to give you even a penny.
When I pushed back, Julie's face turned beet red and she snapped.
Stingy rich folks, aren't you? Do you guys even work? Having $300 million and still working? How much do you love money? Rich folks like you taking away jobs from others is simply low class. Our employers consider Jessica and I as formal employees. You have no right to tell us to quit.
I got my work ethic from my parents' upbringing. Because we were wealthy enough to collect high-end paintings, we were well off back home. However, my parents, fearing I would develop a skewed sense of money, always tried to maintain an ordinary lifestyle. My dad worked diligently, and my mom put her all into house chores and her part-time job. If my parents had been lazy just because they were rich, I might have never thought of working earnestly and might have ended up unemployed. Now, as an adult with a child, I've taken after my parents, and I've raised Jessica with the same values. I took on part-time jobs because I wanted Jessica to see a hard-working woman as a role model. Perhaps that's why Jessica never became lazy and grew up to be a responsible adult in society.
Also, working helps you learn common sense in society, and it adds structure to your life. That's why, even if we have money, we believe in working. I don't want unsensible folks like you meddling in our affairs.
When I firmly spoke my piece, Julie was at a loss for words. Jim also said with a stern face, I get it, you're not remorseful. I'm gonna discuss firing you with the higher-ups, so brace yourself. Upon hearing this, Julie snapped back to reality.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Michelle. I've been so stressed out lately and ended up complaining without thinking. I don't need a penny, just please forgive me.
Obviously, after this series of events, I didn't feel like forgiving her.
We don't need your insincere apologies. Face the consequences and suffer for it. I won't forgive you either. It's absurd that after saying such horrible things, you don't genuinely feel remorse.
Following my lead, when Jessica spoke, it seemed Julie finally grasped that she wasn't getting any sympathy. She slumped dejectedly, muttering apologies over and over, but nobody comforted her. Later, I heard from Jim that Julie was fired. She was already known for being frequently late and was often rude to her juniors, so she had multiple issues with her work ethic. With this incident on top, she was swiftly fired. I heard that the moment Julie was informed of her termination, she collapsed on the spot. Reluctantly, an ambulance was called, and at the hospital, they discovered she had diabetes. Seems she didn't consider her age and indulged in meats and sweets daily, which has now put her in a critical condition. Currently, I heard Julie is hospitalized, and the medical bills are piling up. Losing a job while in debt, and on top of that having health issues, her future's probably gonna be pretty tough. The way things turned out for her feels like a harsher punishment than I expected, so my resentment towards her has faded. Jessica seemed to feel the same way, saying, if she's suffering that much, let's let bygones be bygones. On my end, I decided to manage the 3 billion yen I had in Blue Bank, which I guess would be something like $30 million here. After discussing it with my husband, who just returned from a long business trip, and Jessica, we decided to keep only what we'd need for the future and donate the rest. I didn't want any unnecessary attention, so I donated anonymously. This way, we didn't get any weird looks from the public. The money we kept? We didn't leave it in Blue Bank, we put it in a different one. Our family tradition of going out for steak is still going strong. In fact, we all went out just yesterday. My husband was with us this time. We ordered not just beef but also pork and chicken. No one gave us any side glances, and we thoroughly enjoyed our meal. Both Jessica and my husband seemed pleased, and I personally had a blast enjoying the meat. I want to keep making these happy moments with my family. Of course, we're gonna keep an eye on our health too. I live with my son, so you need to leave. Suddenly, my mother-in-law I'm living with threw those cold words at me. I thought I have always been good to my mother-in-law. I've always tried to make sure she didn't have any inconveniences, but it seems my mother-in-law never noticed. There have been times when my mother-in-law treated me poorly, and I have grown resentful of her. Finally, I was like, I'll gladly leave. I haven't intended to say that, but I thought that was probably how I truly felt. My husband is away on a business trip. The only one who'd be in trouble if I left would be my mother-in-law. The luxurious life she's been enjoying in the city is because of me. Had my mother-in-law forgotten that? With these thoughts, I've decided to leave the house. My name is Catherine. I'll be turning 38 this year. My husband and I have been married for 10 years, and we both work. We once considered having children, but the doctor told me it would be difficult for me to conceive. I was told natural conception was nearly impossible, and we considered fertility treatments. However, after many discussions, my husband and I decided not to have children and to enjoy our lives together. Then, my father-in-law got sick and passed away. My mother-in-law had bad knees and living alone in the family home was tough. We thought about hiring a caregiver, but for safety reasons, it seemed best if she lived with us. We were planning to build a house at that time, so we designed it with a room for my mother-in-law in mind. For her convenience, given my mother-in-law's bad knees, we installed a small bathroom, kitchen, and toilet on the first floor. On the second floor, we have our own bathroom and kitchen, thinking my mother-in-law would be comfortable. Though it went over our budget, we felt it was the best decision considering my mother-in-law comfort. It showed our consideration and kindness. But it seemed my mother-in-law didn't see it that way. I could tell from my mother-in-law's behavior since she started living with us. I never had a bad impression of her before, but recently she's become more aggressive toward me. Moreover, my mother-in-law always becomes more aggressive when my husband's not at home. My husband is in sales, and recently he's been traveling abroad more often. While he used to have day trips frequently, it's different with overseas trips. He often stays away for about a week per trip. That very day, my husband mentioned he'd be on an international business trip for about a week. After sending my husband off early in the morning, I began getting ready for work. Suddenly, I heard my mother-in-law's loud voice from downstairs. "Hey! Come down here right now." Wondering what the fuss was about, I quickly headed to the first floor, but everything looked normal. My mother-in-law was just sitting in the living room, watching TV. I had assumed there was some sort of emergency. Then she was like, "Why are you just standing there? Hurry up and make my breakfast." I had never prepared breakfast for my mother-in-law before, as my husband and I both have full-time jobs and she always made her own. I wondered what had changed. Maybe she wasn't feeling well? I suggested she might need to see a doctor, but she was like, "I'm perfectly fine. Can't you see? Shouldn't my son's wife take care of me?" I've heard other households serve a 3-course breakfast every morning. Turns out, the family she was referring to lives together just like us, but the wife is a homemaker. So, she prepares meals 3 times a day. I tried to explain that my husband and I both work, so it's impossible for me to cook in the mornings or midday, but my mother-in-law just turned the TV volume up in frustration. I figured she didn't want to hear what I had to say, so I decided not to say anything more. That day, after finishing work and returning home, I found my mother-in-law waiting for dinner. I made lasagna that my mother-in-law loves, but she was like, "What's this? It's way too salty," and threw all the food I prepared into the trash. After that incident, my mother-in-law became very domineering, constantly picking on me and nitpicking everything I did. When things got unbearable, I confided in a friend who suggested it might be bullying by mother-in-law. Upon researching online, I found numerous similar stories from other my mother-in-laws. As my mother-in-law's behavior continued to worsen, I decided to have a heart-to-heart conversation with her. I took a day off from work and approached her during the day. I was like, "Hey, why have you suddenly started acting so hostile? We've always lived in harmony. If I've done something wrong, let me know. But if you don't talk to me, I won't know how to make things right." However, she didn't seem interested in listening. When I patiently faced my mother-in-law, she eventually started to speak. Apparently, she had become envious after hearing about a family she'd talked about some time ago. In that family, there are 2 kids, a daughter and a son, and the couple lives with the husband's parents. Their home is more spacious than ours, and she's envious because they have coffee with many guests. She mentioned that she wished to spend her retirement in such a manner. Our home isn't necessarily small. In our neighborhood, it's actually considered quite large. We have a backyard big enough for barbecue parties, and I told her we could host home parties without any issues. But she felt inferior and believed she couldn't compete, hence not inviting anyone over. Our conversation didn't conclude with any resolution. However, a few days later, an incident occurred. As I was leaving for work, a lady from across the street was staring at me. Moreover, I noticed people whispering and glancing my way elsewhere. Wondering if there was something odd about my attire or makeup, I checked but found nothing amiss. I discovered the reason for the whispers that evening. On my way home from work, one of the neighbors approached me and said, "Hey, I've heard some rumors, violence ain't right." Violence? I was taken aback. Digging deeper, the rumor was that I had become violent with my mother-in-law. It was said that the confrontation took place on the day we had that discussion and that I even told her to leave if she continued with her lavish lifestyle. I have no memory of doing such a thing and had no intentions of ever doing so. After explaining, the lady thought for a moment and was like, "If that's true, it's really not good." The whole neighborhood's buzzing with this story. I've heard that she's been approaching others, wanting to discuss it and sharing stories of your alleged violence. For a while, I was labeled in the neighborhood as the violent wife. I managed to bear it until about 5 days after my husband left on a business trip. Finally reaching my breaking point. I felt I needed to talk to my husband first, but I couldn't muster the courage to bother him with this during his busy trip. So, I decided to first communicate my feelings to my mother-in-law. "I've noticed you seem to have taken a disliking to me this past week. You're my husband's mother, and I wanted us to live comfortably together. No matter how hard I try, it seems I can't change how you feel. Perhaps it would be best if we consider living separately." My mother-in-law looked taken aback by my suggestion for a moment, but then she was like, "I agree. I never really liked you from the start. Living in this fancy house on my son's dime and acting as if you've done it all. A woman who doesn't even have kids and only works has little value in my eyes," and scoffed. At that point, I wondered what my mother-in-law was misunderstanding. Because, you see, I bought this house. From the down payment of the mortgage, everything's been on me. I had explained it when we built the house, but I wonder if my mother-in-law has forgotten. Moreover, I'm the one covering the living expenses. My mother-in-law gets an allowance from my husband and spends it carelessly, but that's also coming out of my salary. Even though my husband is working hard, he's not making as much as expected, and his income is lower compared to mine. So, the agreement was that we'd cover our living expenses from my income and save whatever my husband made, since we don't have kids and for our future. Before we moved in together, my husband had explained this to her, and he had warned her not to be wasteful. Ever since my husband left on his business trip, My mother-in-law has been watching TV infomercial every day and making phone calls. She probably ordered something. As I was thinking about all this, she started saying things like, she was like, I'm gonna live here with my son. You should leave. I'll discuss the rest with my son. If my son wants, you might even consider a divorce. So, be prepared for that. At this point, I realized it's useless to argue. Once I gave up, I was like, I'll gladly leave, quickly packed my largest suitcase, and decided to leave the house with all I could carry. Before leaving, I glanced at my mother-in-law, and she was smirking at me. She laughed aloud and was like, oh, leaving so soon? That's not too bad of you, but maybe you could be a bit more charming? Honestly, I don't remember doing anything to upset my mother-in-law this much. Whenever my mother-in-law asked for a ride, I would provide one. I tried my best to spend time with her, so she wouldn't feel lonely. We haven't given her the joy of grandkids, and I work. However, that's the life choice we made as a couple, and my mother-in-law has no right to dictate that. As anger surged within me, I thought my mother-in-law'd be the one regretting this in the end. With that thought, I left the house with my heavy luggage. When told to leave, I wondered where I'd go. My childhood home is a plane ride away, and I couldn't abandon my job. Also, I didn't want to worry my parents. The first place that came to mind was my office. I run my own business, a small cafe. I employ 2 students as part-time, but primarily I manage it on my own. The cafe is in a 1-story house, with the extra space used as an office and storage. Though it's a small house, there's enough space for someone to live. I usually drove from home to the office, but living at the office would cut down the commute. Now, I won't need to cook for my mother-in-law anymore, which means more time for work. As someone passionate about my job, I got excited thinking about the extra working hours while setting up a living space in the office. I cleared out the piles of cardboard boxes and decided to sleep on the blanket I had laid out for napping. I also arranged a table and chairs to make work easier. By evening, 2 student part-timers came in for their shifts. They were surprised to see the office looking different, but once I explained the situation, they readily understood. They were even like, let us know if you need anything. We'll help out wherever we can. At that moment, I felt grateful for hiring them. They're such kind-hearted individuals, and they've received excellent feedback from our customers. I've been checking the reviews for our cafe daily, and besides the ambience and the quality of food, many patrons praise the service provided by the part-timers. I had been thinking about raising their pay when I received a call from my husband, who was supposed to be on a business trip. I could only check the message around 9 p.m. My husband mentioned he got home earlier than expected. However, upon arriving, he noticed a lot of my belongings were missing. He confronted my mother-in-law. But my mother-in-law wouldn't spill the beans about my whereabouts. After pressing her for about an hour, she finally explained. My husband then realized I had left due to issues with my mother-in-law and quickly tried to contact me. There were several missed calls, but considering my husband didn't show up at my workplace, I appreciated his understanding of my situation. Feeling guilty about making him worry, I called him back. Without delay, my husband answered, asking what had happened. I was hesitant about whether to be honest about everything, but my husband's persistence made me spill the truth. I briefly explained what my mother-in-law had done to me, and I could tell from my husband's voice that he was furious. He wanted to talk as soon as I finished work. After locking up the cafe and office, I headed home. I had never seen my husband this mad before. Thus, the thought of meeting my husband in this state was intimidating. I reached home around 10 p.m. and noticed that only the lights on the first floor were on. My husband and my mother-in-law must be in the living room. When I tried to unlock the door, my key wouldn't fit. I knocked at the door, and my husband came out to unlock the door. As I entered the living room, there sat my mother-in-law with a sulky expression. Apparently, after I left, she had changed the locks without telling anyone. My husband hadn't noticed earlier since the door was unlocked when he got back from his trip. My husband immediately wanted to hear the whole story from me, so I told him about the incidents over the past week. I explained how my mother-in-law suddenly became overbearing, wouldn't listen during our talks, and went as far as spreading lies about me to the neighbors. Every time I pointed this out, she would accuse me of lying. However, when my husband insisted on hearing everything, she just went silent. After I finished speaking, it was my mother-in-law's turn. My mother-in-law claimed I was violent towards her and wouldn't stop, even when she asked me to. She mentioned she had talked with neighbors, but the harassment from me only seemed to increase. She even began to say that if the neighbors were asked, they would know all about my doings. I wondered what made my mother-in-law so confident to make such outrageous claims. The conversation seemed to be going in circles, and there was no clear conclusion. So, I decided to show something to my husband. I had been collecting video and audio footage. With just a few taps on my smartphone, I could record instantly, and over the past week, I had recorded every time my mother-in-law made snide remarks. Whenever I had the chance, I would prop up my phone to capture my mother-in-law harassing me on video. The footage showed my mother-in-law yelling at me to make dinner and even calling me defective for not having children. Seeing this, my husband was furious, his face turning bright red. On the contrary, my mother-in-law looked pale as if she had seen a ghost. In a desperate attempt to save face, she was like, "This isn't right, Catherine. It's just a misunderstanding. It seems like I'm the bad one, but that's because you cut out the parts where you were being mean. In reality, you've done much worse to me." But my husband, who had experience with video editing, wasn't convinced. If the video had been edited unnaturally, he would have noticed right away. It seemed like my husband completely trusted me. Just as I hoped, he began considering living separately from my mother-in-law. Despite my mother-in-law's vehement objections, my husband seemed firm in his decision. For the time being, I decided to stay at an office. During this period, we discussed whether to live separately and how to go about it if we decided to. Eventually, a conclusion was reached. We were going to send my mother-in-law to a nursing home. We had been against this idea before we moved in together. It seemed like a secure environment where she'd be looked after 24/7. However, my mother-in-law had always said she didn't want to go into a facility. I thought that if she did, it would be incredibly stressful for her. But my husband revealed he had been considering this option for a while. With my mother-in-law's bad knee and both of us working, we just couldn't give her the attention she needed. He believed that the only way to ensure her safety was for her to be in a facility. However, my mother-in-law really pleaded not to be put in a facility, but my husband didn't budge. My husband isn't someone who shows it much, but he really adores me. I started dating him due to his relentless pursuit, and from the time we began our relationship to our marriage, things moved incredibly fast. After getting married, my husband was always helpful around the house and always seemed to put me first. So, I kind of saw it coming when he took my side over my mother-in-law's. My mother-in-law apparently hadn't noticed and assumed my husband would be on her side. But when she was told my mother-in-law'd be placed in a facility, she quickly apologized to me. However, my husband was still upset and didn't listen to anything my mother-in-law said. During all this, I was focusing on running my cafe. Initially open from lunchtime, I began opening it for breakfast and started serving alcohol in the evenings. To my surprise, the number of customers nearly doubled. I was so shocked by the huge response that I inadvertently shared the news with my mother-in-law. I was like, "Thanks to you kicking me out, the cafe is doing better than ever. Thanks for giving me this opportunity," but it seemed to come off as sarcasm to my mother-in-law. I'll never forget the look on my mother-in-law's face when I told her about the cafe's success. Her lips were tight and her eyes weren't smiling. In the end, we had my mother-in-law stay at the closest senior facility. Although the cost was higher compared to other places, it was known for its excellent services. Despite the past tensions, I never wished any ill on my mother-in-law. I'm actually thankful for her raising my husband to be the man he is. So when it came to choosing a facility for her, I wanted to find the best possible place. Being somewhat forced into the facility, I heard my mother-in-law was causing a lot of trouble there. Whenever I visited, I was told she had issues with other residents. The reasons for these disputes were minor things, like making eye contact or speaking too loudly. She often clashed with other residents, but fortunately, it never reached a point where they'd kick her out. They ended up isolating her from the others. The staff kept me updated about my mother-in-law's situation. Initially, my mother-in-law was quite spirited, but about 6 months into her stay, I was told she seemed to lose her energy. She probably felt lonely without talking to others. Recently, with the help of the staff, I received a report that she's now able to converse well with other residents. However, it seems my mother-in-law's nature hasn't changed, and due to her bad attitude, she was evicted from the facility. Although she moved to another facility, she ended up isolated and her loneliness seemed to intensify, possibly leading to dementia. It's a bit sad that she had to be separated from her son, my husband. Still, if it ensures everyone's peace, it might be for the best. Now, I live in Europe with my husband. My husband, who had been traveling abroad more frequently for work, recently said he wouldn't be able to return home for about a month. Then, he suggested he'd like to take me abroad with him. I run a cafe and thought I couldn't possibly leave, but luckily 2 of my student workers were graduating, so I decided to close the cafe and follow my husband. I dreamed of running a restaurant abroad and set off for Europe. At first, the language barrier was tough, and I mostly stayed home. But after making friends in the neighborhood, my perspective changed. A friend got me a job at the local grocery store, and gradually, I was able to communicate better. Eventually, I decided to open a small cafe in a corner of a town. We had a house back in Oregon which was still being mortgaged. We contemplated whether to sell it or not, but due to some false rumors in the neighborhood, we sold it to fund the new cafe. Thanks to the many acquaintances I'd made, a lot of people visited on the opening day. It was also promoted on social media as a homey cafe run by an American, and some customers even came all the way from the US. The reason I started the cafe was that I managed to get permanent residency in Europe. The reason my husband was traveling more was that he was getting more work opportunities abroad than in the US. My husband's company proposed relocating him to their branch in Europe, so we just ended up settling there. He eventually quit that job, but in his new job, he seems to be really shining. And is now earning about the same as I am.
When we were like, we've settled down here in Europe, and with both of us, it's hard to figure out where to use our money. To our surprise, we found out we were expecting.
We were told natural conception would be difficult, but it feels like a gift from above. Raising a child will be challenging, but I believe my husband and I will manage.
We can't wait to meet our baby, even though the due date is a way off.
The town I live in is filled with friendly folks, and when I shared the news of my pregnancy, everyone was genuinely thrilled for me. I believe that in this environment, our child will surely have a happy life.
How dare you?
With those words from my mother-in-law, I was kicked out of the house. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had been injured and was urgently taken to the hospital. I had rushed there with my husband, Mark, only to be suddenly confronted with such an accusation. All eyes, including those of my husband and father-in-law named Bill, turned to me. And so, I was expelled from the family for an unfounded crime. But I had no memory of doing anything wrong. Later, with advice from a certain individual, I realized there was a shocking truth about Patricia. My name is Sarah. I'm a 37-year-old housewife. I've been a housewife since I got married to Mark 10 years ago. I don't have many friends, so I mostly stay at home. Mark and I have been dating since college and decided to get married a while after we both started working. A few years back, we started living with my father-in-law Bill and mother-in-law Patricia. Originally, we wanted to have kids, and decided against living together considering the kids. But, we found out we had trouble conceiving. We tried infertility treatments desperately, but couldn't have a child. Continuing the treatments would not only be expensive but also mentally stressful, so we decided not to have children. That's when talks about living with my in-laws began. Honestly, I wasn't too keen on the idea. But my in-laws didn't seem like bad people, so I thought maybe living with them might be okay. We began living together on the condition that Mark would always have my back. Considering the age of Patricia and Bill, I handled most of the household chores. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., adjusting to their schedule, and make breakfast. Lunch was made according to their individual schedules. I did the cleaning daily and sometimes even drove them to the hospital when I had some spare time. I did my best for my in-laws and I thought our relationship wasn't that bad. But one day, I overheard a conversation between Patricia and Bill. That day, I had plans to have lunch with a friend, so I made lunch for my in-laws early and left the house. I was enjoying lunch at a cafe with my friend, but she had to leave early because her daughter got a fever. As a result, I ended up parting ways with my friend a few hours earlier than we had originally planned. I thought about making a detour somewhere, but I just did my grocery shopping for dinner and headed straight home. I figured my elderly in-laws would feel more at ease if I was home. After finishing shopping, I opened the front door and headed for the living room. There's a hallway leading to the living room, and my in-laws' bedroom is off of it. I heard them conversing as I walked by. They usually keep their door completely shut, but that day it was slightly ajar, allowing their conversation to filter out. I wasn't initially curious about their conversation, but the moment I was about to walk past, I heard my name. Intrigued, I wanted to know what they were discussing. Leaning close to the door, I was met with a barrage of shocking words.
Sarah's out having lunch with her friend again. She did the same just recently. Despite being a full-time homemaker, she lives a carefree life. Without Mark, she wouldn't be able to maintain that lifestyle. Well, maybe Sarah just needs a break every once in a while. But I do feel it's unfair. We can't dine out because of our health, yet she goes out all the time on her own. Exactly. Why did he marry her? I wished he married the one he was dating before. Besides, Sarah has a rather unrefined side. Her cooking isn't great either. I discovered that especially my mother-in-law had a negative perception of me.
I had never heard such comments directly, and Mark had never mentioned that his parents disliked me. So this was my first time realizing that they did. Knowing they disliked me made interactions with them somewhat awkward. Of course, I continued with my usual chores and tasks, but the conversations between us started dwindling. It was hard to confide in Mark, and if I did, confronting the in-laws would likely lead to denial, making my case harder. As I pondered what to do next, things took a worse turn. My mother-in-law's cherished necklace went missing. And shockingly, she blamed it on me. She demanded a search of my room, and to prove my innocence, I complied. Though I was certain I hadn't taken it, Patricia's necklace mysteriously emerged from a drawer containing my jewelry.
See, I knew it was her. She always eyed my necklace with envy. I bet she's taken other things too.
With that, Mark and my father-in-law frantically searched my room. In the end, only the necklace was found. I was left standing in the middle of the room, feeling ostracized. From that day on, I was treated like a thief, distanced by the family. They wouldn't listen to any of my explanations. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law was spreading nasty rumors about me throughout the neighborhood.
That woman stole my necklace. Can you believe it? And she keeps denying it, even though it was found in her room.
Given the talk, every time I left the house, I was met with cold stares. Life went on this way for a while, and being home became increasingly uncomfortable. Usually, I would stay home, engage in my hobby of crafting, and converse with my in-laws. However, lately, I had been spending more time outside. After preparing breakfast for the in-laws in the morning, I would head out. I'd kill time at diners or comic book stores until Mark returned from work. One day, I received a call from Mark informing me that his mother had been urgently hospitalized.
Where are you? Mom fell down some stairs at a pedestrian bridge and got injured. Please come to the nearest hospital from the house. Dad and I will be with Mom. Mark said hurriedly, before hanging up.
I happened to be close to the hospital at that moment, so it only took me about 5 minutes to get there on foot. After quickly finishing up some errands, I walked briskly to the hospital where I heard my mother-in-law had been taken. I asked a nurse which room she was in, and as I headed to the room, I had an ominous feeling. When I opened the door, everyone present turned to look at me simultaneously. Their gazes were sharp and hostile, like they were looking at a villain. I thought my bad feeling might be right. Then, my mother-in-law pointed at me and shouted,
"How dare you?"
When I asked what was going on, she exclaimed,
"Don't play dumb. You pushed me down the stairs. When I was walking over the pedestrian bridge near the house, I felt someone push me from behind. It hurt so much when I fell, but with the last of my strength, I looked up, and there you were. You vanished before others gathered, but I'm sure it was you." "No, I didn't."
I tried to explain that it wasn't me, but my husband and father-in-law interrupted.
"I never thought you'd be capable of such a thing. Just leave our home." "I agree. This is for the best. You two had issues before. It's better if you live separately." "That's right. Just leave. You're not family. And Mark, you should divorce her."
"Yeah, I'm going to," Mark said. Without being able to defend myself, it was decided that we would divorce, and I would be ousted from the family. Leaving the hospital before my husband and father-in-law, I felt lost. I never imagined things would turn out this way, and my parents live far away. It would take a lot of effort to move my belongings there. Moreover, my parents were strict, and I didn't know what they'd say if I told them I was divorcing. However, at that moment, I thought they were the only ones I could rely on. On my way home from the hospital, I called my mother. "I'm sorry. I'm gonna get a divorce and I want to come back for a while. Is that okay?" Hearing the tone of my voice, my mother sensed something was wrong. "Okay, I understand. I'll tell your father. Just pack what you can for tomorrow. We'll rent a large vehicle and come over." When I got home, I packed my belongings as my mother instructed. I couldn't take everything, so I left the furniture. I packed my clothes, accessories, and mementos in boxes. I came across a photo of me and my husband. I wasn't sure if I should keep it. I loved him and I thought we could have lived happily together if it weren't for this incident. But I knew there was no going back. I'm sure he'll contact a divorce lawyer by tomorrow, and I've decided to throw away all the pictures of my husband once and for all. The next day, my parents came over in a large truck that could carry all my stuff.
"Long time no see. You probably didn't sleep well last night. I'll drive, so you just rest in the car." And my father drove the long 6-hour journey by himself.
My father had told me to get some sleep, but tears streamed down my face in the back seat, overwhelmed by my parents' kindness. I wasn't sure if they noticed or not, but they, sitting in the front, didn't say a word to me. After about 3 hours, my parents and I made it back home safely. "I know you're tired, but could you tell me a bit more about what happened? You haven't done anything wrong, right? Given the situation, there's a chance you could be arrested, so I really want you to tell me everything," my parents asked, looking for more details. I explained that I was suspected of stealing my mother-in-law's necklace and now was being accused of pushing her down the stairs.
"That's a lie, right? Why would anyone make up such a story? I think someone either wanted to harass you, or they had something to hide. That's the only two options I see." "Something to hide? Maybe someone who shouldn't have been there was present and Patricia got seriously injured by accident. So they're trying to blame it on Sarah to cover it up, maybe?"
What my father said made sense. But I had always thought such things only happened in TV shows or movies. No official complaint was made, and I just wanted to get a peaceful divorce. However, it seemed my parents thought otherwise. Well, it made sense. If their only daughter was being framed, they'd naturally want to prove her innocence.
"Maybe we should do a bit more investigation? I'll also reach out to some folks I know."
Considering my parents' advice, I decided to look deeper into the matter. Just as I was about to look into the situation in detail, divorce papers from my husband's attorney were mailed to my parents' house. I thought having the divorce papers in front of me might make me reconsider. But to my surprise, I realized my feelings for my ex-husband Mark were gone. Probably because he had never supported me. Over time and through various events, I just didn't love Mark anymore. Having finally cut ties with Mark and both his parents, I began to seriously investigate the incident. Patricia, who used to be my mother-in-law, doesn't seem to have filed a complaint, and it appears the police and hospital staff find it a bit suspicious. Given the fuss she made, everyone probably expected her to file a complaint. Digging deeper would be quite a hassle. So, I decided to seek help from my father. He used to work for the NYPD, so he has many connections within the force. He was able to arrange for me to view the security footage from the nearby cameras. Security cameras don't store footage for very long, but thankfully, the footage around the staircase where Patricia was allegedly pushed was still available. Examining the footage closely, it was clear that Patricia was indeed pushed down the stairs. However, no matter how much they zoomed in, it wasn't me. To further solidify my alibi, I checked the footage from where I was at the same time. It showed me taking care of some business. This proved my innocence. Turns out, when I got the call about Patricia's accident, I was at a different hospital. Having endured more than my fair share of harassment from Patricia and her group, I had been visiting a psychiatrist. That day, I had an appointment, and the footage showed me leaving the psychiatrist's office. This confirmed I wasn't to blame, but I wasn't gonna let it end there. To clear my name from all the humiliation I'd suffered, I chose to confront Patricia and her group head-on. I brought an attorney with me and headed to Mark's house. After consulting with an attorney, it turned out that due to the emotional distress I suffered, I might be able to claim compensation. At home, there were Mark, Patricia, and Bill, my ex-father-in-law, all staring at us with puzzled looks.
Who's that guy? Why bring someone like that here now? I said I wouldn't press charges, so you should be grateful.
In response to Patricia, the attorney presented a document.
What's this?
The document stated that I was not the cause of Patricia's injury, and that someone else had pushed her down the stairs.
I apologize for the late introduction. I am Sarah's attorney. As mentioned in this document, Sarah was somewhere else on the day you testified that she was pushed down the stairs. Of course, we've already verified the truth with security camera footage. If you'd like, I can show you the footage. And there was another person visible near the stairs besides you, Patricia.
When the attorney explained that much, Patricia quickly pulled the document towards herself.
What the heck is this? Just when I thought you'd suddenly show up, this is all in the past. I said I'd forgive you, so please don't bring it up anymore. Patricia was clearly panicking.
Both Mark and Bill seemed suspicious.
Why are you so flustered? If Mom didn't do anything wrong, you should be confident about it. That's right. We're on Patricia's side, after all.
Despite their reassuring words, Patricia's face grew paler.
Aren't you too curious about who pushed Patricia down the stairs? I do wonder. Who was it? Who would do such a thing to my dear wife? I won't forgive them. Well, hold on a sec.
Ignoring Patricia's attempt to stop me, I continued.
It was Patricia's affair partner. Her affair partner?
Patricia had been infatuated with a man for some time. That man was a bartender, and Patricia had gone into debt just to lavish money on him. However, no matter how much money she gave him, he never truly belonged to her. Frustrated, Patricia confronted him. That confrontation took place at the top of those stairs. Even though the Patricia didn't own the man, reports indicate that there was a physical relationship between them. It seems Patricia was waiting for the man to leave the bartender job, but he showed no signs of leaving and often went out with other customers. The man had always seen Patricia as a troublesome client, and in a fit of anger, he allegedly pushed her down the stairs. Realizing the gravity of his actions, the man tried to help Patricia, but she said, "It's okay. We'll say my daughter-in-law did this. You should go home." Unable to approach the police for this particular investigation, they had no choice but to hire a private investigator. Pictures capturing the two are clear, and there's no way to deny it. Upon presenting the evidence to the police, an immediate investigation was launched, and the man was arrested. During interrogation, he confessed everything that transpired between him and Patricia on the staircase.
Tell me it's a lie. Please say it isn't true. Cheating, huh? You're the worst.
Realizing there's no escaping the truth, Patricia immediately began to apologize.
I'm sorry. I was just so lonely. What do you mean, lonely? I've always been there for you. We're getting a divorce. I don't want to hear any excuses.
Upon being exposed, Patricia faced an immediate decision of divorce. Though she tried desperately to salvage her relationship with Bill, he was too enraged to listen. Mark, too, was shocked to learn of his mother's infidelity and looked at Patricia with disgust. Moreover, the amount of debt Patricia accumulated to lavish the man was several $100,000, an amount she couldn't possibly repay with her pension alone. Patricia wasn't the type to save money, so repaying the debt would likely take a significant amount of time. She begged Mark for help, but he snapped back, "Are you kidding me? Because of your lies, I divorced Sarah. I'm not giving you a single dime for the money you borrowed for your lover." In the end, Patricia faced both a divorce and being disowned by Mark. Unable to repay the money and left without a place to stay, Patricia had no choice but to sadly return to her own home. To pay off the debt as soon as possible, it seems that Patricia's elder brother, who took over the family house, has taken on the responsibility. However, she'll be isolated until she repays all the money to him. Patricia can't just go outside as she pleases, and she doesn't have any money to spend freely. When Patricia receives her pension, it's all ordered to be given to her brother. I bet she regrets mingling with that bar and harassing me. I haven't seen Patricia since then, but apparently, the once youthful-looking Patricia has aged considerably. And for me, having been mentally tormented by those three on a daily basis, I managed to get a small amount in damages. From a certain point, whenever I spoke to those three, I always made sure to have a voice recorder on, so I had more than enough evidence when claiming for damages. Later on, I received numerous messages and voicemails from Mark expressing his wish to reconcile. But I'm not gonna get back with Mark. Even though he had promised to always be on my side when we moved in together, just thinking of being with Mark, who couldn't even keep that single promise, gives me the creeps. I'm sure if we were together in the future, I'll find more unpleasant things about him, and in the end, I'd be the one getting hurt. It seems Mark and Bill are living together, but with Patricia and I gone, their house is said to be filled with a cold atmosphere. Bill isn't very strong health-wise, so he needs regular hospital visits. Mark juggles his job and housework while also driving Bill to and from the hospital. It must be quite tough for him. I get diary-like messages from him every day about his daily struggles, but I usually send them straight to the trash without reading all of them. Since divorcing Mark, I've been enjoying my single life. I've successfully found a new job, and I became a beauty advisor, something I've always wanted to be. Up until now, I was always occupied with looking after Mark and my in-laws, so my own beauty regimen was always on the back burner. During a time when I was away from my in-laws, I once visited a department store's cosmetics section. There, I received advice on how to enhance my beauty and was told how to be more confident. That was the first time in my life I felt so confident, and I believe the beauty advisor at that time played a huge role in making me who I am today. That's why I decided to pursue a career as a beauty advisor, hoping to inspire others the way I was inspired. Although the job involves many behind-the-scenes tasks and challenges, I find it fulfilling. Thankfully, since becoming a beauty advisor, I've received many compliments on my appearance. I've started to attract attention from men. A while back, a man approached me at a cafe, and we've been on several dates since. Just the other day, after confessing his feelings, we officially started dating. He knows I'm divorced, and even after knowing my past, he expressed his feelings for me. Unlike Mark, he's always supportive, and he's the first one to lend a hand when I'm in need. It's been 3 years since my divorce from Mark, and I'll soon turn 40. Lately, I've been pondering if remarrying wouldn't be such a bad idea. But first and foremost, I want to be someone I'm proud of and want to continue improving myself. I genuinely wish that women with feelings like mine would be more confident and speak up without fear.
You've got a spare room, don't you? I'm moving in, so you need to leave.
My sister-in-law and mother-in-law, who'd suddenly shown up at my brand new house, walked around sizing everything up, not even pausing to pay respects to my mother's memorial plaque before confronting me with this demand. My husband, Jason, acted like he didn't have a care in the world, lounging on the sofa with our cat even as he heard what was happening. I looked up to the heavens and thought, this is the end. Filled with a fiery determination for revenge, I calmly said, "All right then, take care," and sold the house I'd barely lived in. My name is Madison, and I'm a 30-year-old office worker. Growing up in a single-parent household, I watched my mom struggle financially, so I worked hard to earn scholarships and relieve her burden as much as I could. She also wanted me to go to college. Probably because she had a hard time without a degree herself. To fulfill her wish, I studied relentlessly while others were out having fun and got into a top university, straight through. After graduating, I landed a job at a leading corporation. When the job offer came, my mom and I jumped for joy. The day I got my first paycheck, we splurged on sushi in Beverly Hills, but we were both so tense in the upscale environment that we couldn't even taste the food. I was worried about fitting in at a glamorous company since I'd always been focused on my studies, but my colleagues were very kind, and I managed to get by. Even with a good salary, my mom and I couldn't shake our frugal habits. She continued working part-time and living in our small apartment. Our only indulgence became going out to enjoy delicious meals occasionally. Every time we did, my mom would say, "Having such a wonderful daughter who can treat me to meals like this, I'm truly blessed." Thank you. That always made me feel proud and like all my efforts were worthwhile. But 4 years into my career, perhaps due to years of hardship, my mom's health began to decline. We went on a spa trip to hopefully improve her health, and although she seemed happy, her condition didn't get better. She kept going through cycles of rest and activity. I was consumed with worry. What would I do without her? That was all I could think about. That's when I met Jason. He was 2 years younger, a born salesman, and an outsourced sales rep with a silver tongue. Embarrassingly, at 27, I'd never had a boyfriend. Between studying and the fear of being judged for my lack of experience at my age, I had always run from any potential relationships, and before I knew it, I was 27. Jason effortlessly became a part of my life. We both didn't have fathers and loved cats. And since neither of us could keep a pet, sharing favorite cat videos and dreaming of having one someday was what brought us close. After a while, he suggested we go to a cafe. I agreed, heart racing, and he texted back that he'd wanted to ask sooner but was worried about being turned down. I was over the moon, not realizing at the time that it was probably a line he'd used before. But I believed he truly cared for me. And then, as our relationship started, something miraculous happened. My mom began to regain her spirits as she saw me dressing up and going out. She'd say with a smile, "I'll take care of the house. You go and have a good time," almost as if she were the one going on the date. I had always thought sacrificing my happiness was the way to repay her. But I realized that my happiness made her happy too, just as her happiness was mine. As Jason and I became closer, my mom's health improved, and she spent less time bedridden. When I told Jason about such a conversation with my mother, he proposed, saying, "Hey, why don't we just get married? That way, your mom can rest a little easier, you know?" Despite it being only 6 months into our relationship, I was completely smitten with Jason. His sister and mother were hairstylists who ran a salon together, and since they planned to live together in the future, he assured me that it wouldn't be a problem for him to live with my mother. When I introduced Jason to my mother, she was moved to tears and grasped both his hands, saying, "Please, take good care of Madison." Jason firmly held her hands in return and declared while looking into my mother's eyes, "I'm honored, ma'am." I might be younger and not very reliable, but I promised to make Madison happy. At that moment, I was so overjoyed I almost cried, but looking back now, I realize he was nothing but a terrible jerk. I would later come to understand how little experience I had with the opposite sex, or rather, how little I knew about the world. Following his declaration, Jason moved in with us, bringing along a slightly large suitcase. He suggested that it would be best to start living together in the house my mother was accustomed to. We welcomed Jason into our small apartment, and while my mother enthusiastically explained how everything worked, he barely listened and said, "Don't mind me, I doubt I'll be here much." I knew he was often out drinking for work and busy with client golf or surfing on Sundays, so I thought that was what he was referring to. But the reality was different. He truly never came home. On the rare occasions he did, he would just take a bath, sleep, and upon waking up, he would ask me, "Hey, can you give me some money for food?" At first, I didn't understand and asked him honestly, "Why don't you just eat here? Besides, what about your share of the living expenses, Jason?" Jason had not been contributing financially to the household, and my mother and I were living just as we had before. He then laughed with a puzzled look on his face. "Living expenses? Why should I, when I'm hardly ever here?" I almost agreed with him for a second, but then I shook myself out of it and challenged him.
Wait a minute. We're married, right? That means we're supposed to share our lives together, so. You want me to come home every day? No, I get that you're busy and maybe staying at friends' places, but I'd like to get a message from you when that's the case.
While we were dating, Jason was very attentive, always letting me know if he was going to be late for a date, and he never broke a promise. But after we got married, he stopped reading my texts, and days would go by without a reply. When I brought this up, Jason suddenly turned ice cold and said, "Didn't think you were the kind of woman to say stuff like that," and turned away. His cold expression was something I had never seen before, and it chilled me to the bone. So I blurted out, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be possessive." And he instantly softened, "I know. But come on, we're married, right? Don't you trust me?" he asked, tilting his head. I shook my head vigorously. "No, that's not it. I do trust you," I said, almost in tears, and he looked into my eyes and whispered, "Thank you," then quickly added, "So, about $600 will do, okay?" Fearing he might leave me, I gave in and handed over the money. In hindsight, that was the beginning of a nightmare. To avoid worrying my mother, I couldn't confide in her and explained that Jason was just on a lot of business trips. Alone with my thoughts, I continued this strange marriage, where I would give money to Jason whenever he occasionally came home. When I finally couldn't stand it anymore and confronted him, he simply wrote his name on a divorce paper and handed it to me, saying, "If you get sick of this, you can leave me at any time." It's strange how humans work. Being given such an option made it impossible for me to leave. Jason had clearly read my mind. My mom noticed something was off with me, but she never tried to address it. As half a year passed, for some reason, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law started coming over to our place more often. Even though they supposedly ran a beauty salon, they'd show up on weekdays or weekends, without even bringing a small gift, sit in Jason's room while he was out, and say, "Don't mind us. Just some tea and snacks will do," and they'd stay for hours, sometimes even joining us for lunch or dinner. When I eavesdropped on their conversations, they were mostly bad-mouthing others, creating a really unpleasant atmosphere. One day, loud enough for me to hear, my sister-in-law said, "Wow, can't believe he married such a plain Jane. Her fashion sense is so drab," and with reckless abandon, my mother-in-law added, "Well, if she were attractive, she'd probably cheat on you," and they laughed heartily together. They didn't specify who, but I knew they were talking about me. When I was reeling from the shock and covering my ears, I heard the damning words, "Well, she's pretty much a good cash cow, isn't she?" And with only her mom around, said my sister-in-law, and my mother-in-law chimed in with a worldly tone, "Seems easy enough to get money out of her. Plus, we get to do whatever we want," and they cackled again. I wanted to storm out of the room and tell them to leave, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Since that day, I've been feeling really down. Jason, as usual, didn't come home and didn't even read my messages. During this time, I failed to notice my mom's health deteriorating again. Then one day at work, I got a call that my mom had been rushed to the hospital by ambulance. When I got there, I found out she had fallen down the stairs of our apartment complex, severely injuring her back. The doctor said that, given her age, she'd likely have to use a wheelchair from now on. From what I was told, Mom had been feeling under the weather for quite some time, experiencing frequent bouts of dizziness. It seems that dizziness was the culprit behind her fall down the stairs. My mom kept apologizing. "I'm so sorry, Madison. I'm really sorry." Over and over, and I just shook my head, crying. I was determined to break through this tough situation. Given that my mom's hospital stay would be quite long, including rehabilitation, I decided to look for a wheelchair-accessible home. Fortunately, we had lived frugally, so there was a decent amount of savings. My mom always loved looking at home ads in the newspapers, often saying how much she'd like to live in such houses. I held on to the hope that buying the home she dreamt of might bring her spirit back. When I asked Jason for his opinion, he casually said, "Why not? I'd like my own room." "Oh yeah, let's get a cat too." And seeing Jason's happy face for the first time in a long while made me foolishly happy, so I enthusiastically started house hunting. Luckily, I found the perfect spec house right in our neighborhood. It was completely wheelchair accessible. I felt it was destiny and made an immediate purchase. I could afford a down payment of around $360,000, and thanks to being employed by a top-notch company, the mortgage was easily approved. Of course, Jason didn't contribute a dime, but that had become the norm. He only visited my mom once at the hospital. By the way, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, despite their frequent visits to our house, never came to see her. I hurried to finalize the house deal before my mom was discharged, and managed to move us in perfectly. It was honestly exhausting to balance work and moving, but thinking of my mom and Jason's happy faces, I pushed through. When my mom came to the new house in her wheelchair, her eyes sparkled as she looked around our model home-like place and exclaimed like a child, "I can't believe I get to live in a house like this. It feels like a dream." Jason too seemed to like his new room, as he started coming home more often. Then we went to the pet store together and brought home 2 adorable cats. Both Jason and my mom doted on the cats, and our home was filled with lively energy. Just as I was starting to think everything might turn out okay, tragedy struck again. 2 months after moving in, one morning, my mom didn't wake up. I found it strange and went to check on her, only to discover she had passed away, cold. I called an ambulance, but it was too late. She had suffered a heart attack. With the new house and everything else seemed so pointless now, I was overwhelmed by despair and hardly remember the funeral proceedings. Jason acted the part of the dutiful, gentle husband at the funeral, but as soon as we got home, he'd do nothing but flop on the couch and say, "Man, I'm beat," tossing the urn carelessly on a shelf. He then asked me, "When's dinner?" as I sat holding my mother's memorial plaque, and just played with the cat. Seeing this, I finally snapped back to reality. I'd realized a long time ago that my marriage was a mistake. But I'd been pretending everything was fine, so as not to worry my mother. I also didn't want to admit my failure to myself. But can I really call him my husband if he doesn't even comfort me as I mourn my beloved mother? As I was staring at my so-called husband, dumbfounded, the doorbell rang. When I went to answer it, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law, still dressed in their mourning clothes, barged in, saying, "Why, this place is huge. Why didn't you tell us about it?" You see, either my mother nor I had given my mother-in-law our new address. I assumed Jason would tell them, but it seemed he hadn't bothered, perhaps out of disinterest. As they walked around the house, eyeing everything greedily, they smirked at each other and said, "You've got spare rooms, right? We'll live here. You can leave." It seemed they were under the impression Jason bought the house. Jason, meanwhile, continued to relax on the couch with the cat, seemingly oblivious to everything. Looking up to the heavens, I thought it was all over, and then my mother-in-law, still hyped up, said, the apartment we're living in now is so noisy. The landlord comes every day just because we're a bit behind on the rent. That's when I realized their frequent visits were to escape from their landlord. My sister-in-law grinned and said, "I'll take the upstairs south room." Madison always had a knack for choosing the good spots, didn't she? They saw my mother's death as an opportunity to shamelessly move themselves into my home. Naturally, I thought, I'll send these people packing to hell. Fine, I'll leave. Take care, then. As soon as I agreed, they nearly jumped for joy and said to Jason, "Jason, we can live together again. You really can't manage without us, can you?" Jason, perhaps too tired to care, lazily laughed and said, Yeah, I'm off to bed," and retreated to his room. With spring in their step, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law told me, "We'll be moving in on Tuesday in 2 weeks, so make sure you're out by then," and left. "Next week, huh?" I murmured, carefully placing my mother's memorial plaque, portrait, and ashes on the shelf, and whispered to her picture, "Watch over me, Mom," as if she was smiling back at me saying, "Give them hell." I promptly filled out the divorce papers I'd prepared earlier and rushed them to the courthouse, then started plotting my revenge. Come Monday, I was sitting at a cafe terrace with a view of the new house, hat pulled down over my eyes, waiting. There was a for sale sign by the new house's door plate. The autumn sky was clear, and as I was leisurely reading a book, a moving truck pulled up in front of the house, and out stepped Jason, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law. I knew that Jason had been helping them move over the weekend. I had demurely asked him, "Please don't come back until the moving day. If I see you, I might get sentimental." They were perplexed by the for sale sign, but Jason nonchalantly suggested it might be a prank and tried to open the door with his key. Which of course didn't fit. I had changed the locks. Jason was frantically rattling the keys. Both my sister-in-law and mother-in-law looked on with anxious expressions. Frantically, he fiddled with the key as the movers looked on, ready to start.
"What's the meaning of this for sale sign?"
My sister-in-law and mother-in-law demanded, irritation rising in their voices. Jason, still seemingly unfazed, said, "I'll just make a call," and that's when my phone vibrated. I ignored it. And as he couldn't get through to me, panic began to set in on his face. The two women looked on anxiously as they and Jason received frosty stares from the movers. Finally, he called someone else, the real estate agency listed on the sign. And there I was, sipping my coffee. "Hello, I'm calling about a property in." Yes. "It's being sold without my consent. Could you come over here, please?" Jason began to explain on the phone when he was interrupted. It's already being sold by the owner? No, that can't be right. You want to sell it if I want to buy it? What are you talking about? Please hold on," and he hung up the phone. Then, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law, with faces like furious demons, stormed up to Jason and demanded, "Hold on a minute. Isn't this the house you bought?" "No. I mean, it's not that I bought it, but isn't it considered joint property if you're married? Madison can't just sell it without consent," he retorted with surprising confidence, so I stepped in to deal with it myself. Surprised, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law turned to me and nearly snapped, "What have you done with this house?" I responded with a sly voice, "What have I done? I sold it. It's my property, after all. Feel free to buy it if you want." "Oh. I thought living here meant that kind of arrangement," playing dumb. Jason turned pale and started, "Hey, you can't just do whatever you," to which I shot back, "What are you talking about? You haven't contributed a dime. And to talk about joint property when you haven't even contributed to living expenses since we got married. How dare you?" For the first time in my life, I was yelling at someone out of anger. Jason was taken aback by the sudden resistance from a woman who used to be compliant to him. I continued to press Jason, "You better give me back all the money I've given you. I'm ready with a lawyer," and shoved a business card and a claim for alimony in his face. I've always kept a household account book, so I had carefully calculated all the money I'd given to Jason. Though it was only a year and a half of marriage, the money I had handed over amounted to nearly $20,000. When Jason floundered, saying, "That was supposed to be for our living expenses, wasn't it?" "You can't just claim that." My sister-in-law and mother-in-law also chimed in, "Exactly. What are you even saying? A housewife receiving living expenses is a given." Claiming that back is terrifying for an elite woman, to which I shouted back, "Shut up. Don't meddle in someone else's business. And you too have some nerve." It felt like something inside me had exploded. Both my sister-in-law and mother-in-law seemed overwhelmed by my outburst and began to tremble, holding each other. There was no way I was going to lose to these women who were always bad-mouthing others behind their backs. Jason started to back away, looking like he might run off at any moment. He was the type of man who'd run when things got tough. "No use in running," I said firmly. "I'm going to make sure you settle this properly." It seemed my resolve had an impact. Jason, too, collapsed just like my sister-in-law and mother-in-law, looking completely lost. The movers, looking troubled, said, "Where should we move the items to?" I replied, though it felt cruel, "I don't know. Ask them." Wondering where to move to when they don't even have a house, and I just smiled sweetly. What happened to them after they lost their place to go, I don't know. They probably rented a new apartment through some contacts of Jason. Jason had quit his job at a company soon after marrying me. He was scouted for a nightclub because of his playboy skills. Every night, he used the money from me like water, and while it seemed to go well at first, by the time I built our new house, he was scraping by. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law, unaware of such things, had come to depend on Jason's supposed financial strength based on the new house he had built and moved in as soon as my mother passed away. They used to say, "The beauty salon business is going well lately. We can support you, so you don't have to worry about anything." But in reality, the beauty salon managed by my mother-in-law had long since gone under. Swamped with debt and lacking real skill as hairdressers, they couldn't hold down jobs at any salon they went to. They had both been planning to rely on each other and ended up failing. Eventually, Jason got into trouble with some shady characters and disappeared. It was a fitting end for such a deadbeat man. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law are also missing, and I can't help but think they haven't exactly had the best lives. I couldn't get alimony from Jason, but I've come to see it as the cost of a life lesson. After the divorce, people have said I seem different, and somehow I've entered what you'd call my prime time for attracting others. It seems I used to be seen as serious and quiet, but now there's a certain settled confidence about me that has become attractive. I had been quite put off by the idea of marriage for a while, but as I started dining out with men more often, whenever the mood seemed to set right for something more, I'd excuse myself to go home because of my cats. Their reaction in such moments is quite telling of their character, so it's been a good strategy for sizing up men. In reality, I live in a pet-friendly apartment with my 2 cats. The other day, as I was sorting through my mother's belongings, I found a letter addressed to me. It was dated the month before she passed, right around when I'd settled into my new place. The letter was filled with various memories from my childhood through to my professional life, and it ended with her usual phrase, "To live in such a nice home, to lead such a good life, I've been blessed with a wonderful daughter. Thank you so much." I hugged that letter from my mother tightly and cried my eyes out for a while. Buying that new place definitely wasn't a waste, I've come to realize. From here on out, I'm committed to living positively and earnestly, keeping my mother's words close to my heart, and hoping to make someone feel as rewarded by me as I felt by her.
Hola, suscríbete a Historias Vitales para no perderte nuevas historias. Mi esposa había estado trabajando en su proyecto especial durante 4 meses ahora. No era su proyecto personal, pero ella era la persona principal y responsable de su éxito. El proyecto estaba diseñado para salvar a su empresa, Bixler Enterprises. Los últimos 4 meses habían sido difíciles porque se vio obligada a trabajar duro. Era importante tanto para ella como para la empresa. Había una buena posibilidad de que Bixler Enterprises quebrara si el proyecto no se completaba. Sara tenía una licenciatura de Albrecht y un MBA de Wharton. Era la más inteligente de la familia. Yo empecé a trabajar como mecánico de autos justo después de la secundaria y después de 21 años seguía siendo mecánico de autos. No me importaba porque me gustaba el trabajo y pagaba bien. Era suficiente para pagar la universidad de Sara y criar a 2 hijos. No vivíamos lujosamente, pero estábamos bien. Los niños ya se habían mudado, y las cosas iban bastante bien con nuestros ingresos. Sara quedó embarazada 3 meses después de casarnos a la edad de 18 años. Durante los primeros años de nuestro matrimonio, vivimos con mis padres. Ellos tenían una gran casa vacía ya que 4 de mis hermanos se habían mudado. Eso significaba que teníamos una niñera mientras Sara completaba sus primeros años de universidad. Debido a 2 embarazos, la carrera de 4 años le llevó 6 años completarla. Fue difícil, pero lo logró. Siempre tuve trabajo y nunca me faltó trabajo extra si lo necesitaba. Después de que Sara se graduó de Wharton, alquilamos nuestro propio lugar. Tuvo ofertas de trabajo de varias empresas grandes, pero todas requerían que nos mudáramos. A mí no me importaba, pero Sara quería quedarse cerca de casa. Por eso decidió trabajar en Bixler Enterprises. Pagaba bien, pero lo más importante, le daba responsabilidad y la oportunidad de avanzar. Sara era una empleada trabajadora y dedicada. La presentación es el jueves en el Hotel Dicen en Filadelfia. Tomé unos días libres en el trabajo para ayudarla según fuera necesario. Al final, todo lo que logré fue hacerle algo de comer cuando llegaba a casa. No sabía nada sobre su trabajo, ni tampoco quería saber, los negocios corporativos de alto nivel me aburrían. Empresarios de Europa, Asia y América del Sur venían aquí, la empresa pagaba sus boletos de avión y proporcionaba habitaciones en el Hotel Dicen mientras estaban aquí. Era caro como el infierno, y por algunas cosas que Sara había dicho, la empresa estaba sobreestimando sus finanzas. Su presentación era importante para ella, para la empresa y para más de 200 empleados. Hasta el martes por la noche, todo iba bien. Sara llegó a casa con un traje nuevo, un traje gris con una blusa blanca. Desplegó todo lo que necesitaba en la cama de la habitación de invitados. Cuando se trataba de la limpieza de la casa, ella era normal, pero cuando se trataba del trabajo, era meticulosa. No entendía por qué necesitaba sacar su ropa interior de lujo, pero no dije nada. Además de su traje para la presentación, tenía varios vestidos de cóctel lindos para eventos sociales antes y después del evento. Siempre había evitado tales eventos, pero me sentía obligado a ir con ella si ella quería que lo hiciera. Me agradeció la oferta, pero dijo que no era necesario. Todos los materiales y equipos que necesitaba estaban guardados ordenadamente en el maletero de su Volvo. Antes de salir del trabajo, ella misma conducía el coche para asegurarse de que todo estuviera en perfectas condiciones. Tenía todo el día miércoles para prepararse y toda la noche del miércoles para socializar con sus invitados. Sara era tan buena en lo que hacía que sentía que habría sido mejor si simplemente me hubiera mantenido alejado de ella. Finalmente, había terminado. Lo había revisado y vuelto a revisar todo. Todo lo que necesitaba ahora era una ducha caliente y una buena noche de sueño. Supongo que mi error fue que empecé a revisar sus cosas después de que Sara comenzara a ducharse. Pensé que estaba ayudando, pero resultó ser lo contrario. Estaba moviendo cosas en la cama cuando un pequeño sobre blanco cayó del bolsillo lateral de su bolso de maquillaje. Una carta de una farmacia, pero no del tipo que solemos usar. Dentro había 10 pastillas. No tenía idea de qué era, PREN, y las instrucciones eran confusas. Si es necesario, tomar una pastilla y luego una segunda pastilla 12 horas después. Pensé que podría ser algo que ella había conseguido para la ansiedad o los nervios, pero las instrucciones no tenían sentido. La receta estaba escrita a su nombre el lunes. Volví a poner el sobre en su lugar mientras ella terminaba de ducharse. Decidí que quería saber más sobre PREN antes de contarle sobre ello. Por supuesto, si lo mencionaba, significaría que estaba revisando sus cosas. Odio los dilemas. Mientras Sara se preparaba para dormir, fui a nuestro ordenador doméstico y busqué. 10 minutos después, me uní a mi esposa bajo las sábanas. Pasé toda la noche despierto, preguntándome por qué mi esposa había recogido una receta para la píldora del día después, especialmente después de que me hicieran una vasectomía hace 10 años. A la mañana siguiente, me levanté temprano, pero no estaba descansado. Di un largo paseo, esperando que despejara mi mente. Me dirigí hacia casa con reticencia, temiendo lo que podría hacer o decir cuando llegara allí. Mi hijo Joe se unió a la Marina después de la escuela secundaria y estaba en su primer año en San Diego. Nuestra hija Gloria se casó con su amor de la infancia el año pasado y acababa de mudarse a Dallas. Eso dejaba solo a Sara y a mí. Echaba de menos a los niños, pero esperaba envejecer con mi esposa. Ella era la única mujer que me había interesado, y ahora todo estaba. Si Sara estaba teniendo una aventura, lo ocultaba bien. Por supuesto, nunca la vigilé. Nunca miré sus correos electrónicos o llamadas telefónicas. No tenía razones para hacerlo. No tenía forma de saber qué estaba haciendo en el trabajo o después del trabajo. Confiaba en ella completamente. Ion, ¿dónde demonios has estado? ¿Quieres huevos o algo? No, solo café. No me sentía con muchas ganas de hablar. ¿Qué pasa, cariño? Solo son 3 días. Puedes venir si quieres, pero te aburrirás como una ostra. No, realmente no quiero ir, pero odio dejarte sola. Me preocupo cuando no estás aquí. Es muy dulce, querido, pero estará bien. No voy a salir del hotel en todo este tiempo. Pasaré la mayor parte del día asegurándome de que la sala de conferencias esté lista, y esta noche tendré una agradable charla con nuestros posibles clientes. Mañana, probablemente ni siquiera tendré la oportunidad de ir al baño. Llegaré a casa lo más temprano posible el viernes, te prometo un gran fin de semana si sabes a lo que me refiero. Todo eso suena bien, pero no puedes culparme por preocuparme. Soy un mecánico de autos, y tengo una esposa hermosa y exitosa. A veces tengo la sensación de que estás menos interesada en mejorar nuestra situación familiar que en avanzar en tu carrera. Detente, maldita sea, Ion. Siempre he respetado lo que haces para ganarte la vida y nunca he insinuado lo contrario. Criaste a 2 grandes niños y me pusiste a través de la universidad. Eres un gran esposo, un gran padre y un buen proveedor, y nunca olvides eso. Terminé mi café mientras ella recogía la mesa. ¿Quieres que te llame? No, no es una buena idea. Tendré el móvil apagado, y voy a apagar el teléfono de la habitación por la noche para poder dormir. Te llamaré siempre que pueda. La ayudé a cargar el coche, era tan meticulosa con eso como con todo lo demás. Trabajando, le llevaría 3 horas llegar al Hotel Dicen. Me quedé en el porche y la vi marcharse. No me molesté en preguntarle por las pastillas. Pasé el resto de la mañana en el porche. No recuerdo haberme preocupado tanto como ahora. Me sentía pequeño e insignificante. Me sentía fuera de mi liga. Era un tipo de pueblo con un trabajo mediocre y una esposa exitosa. Era una combinación equivocada. Debería haberlo notado antes. Me sentía estúpido. El mejor traje que tenía era una chaqueta azul y un par de pantalones. Al menos tenía algunas corbatas, aunque tenían 10 años de antigüedad. Acababa de terminar de vestirme cuando sonó el teléfono fijo. Oye, cariño, solo quería avisarte de que llegué bien. ¿Tuviste un buen viaje? Supongo que el tráfico no estaba demasiado denso. Estuvo bien. Te llamaré esta noche. Ahora tengo que irme. Estoy en la habitación 714, Sara. Puedo estar en casa de mis padres o en la de mis hermanos esta noche si quieres llamarme a mi móvil. De acuerdo. Suena el teléfono móvil. Te quiero, tengo que irme. Me tomé mi tiempo para llegar a Filadelfia. No fui directo al Dicen, Primero me detuve y compré un filete con queso. Prometía hacer una larga noche. No estaba seguro de qué iba a hacer. Estacioné en el garaje del hotel y simplemente esperé. Tarde o temprano, tenía que entrar en el hotel. Simplemente no podía decidir cuándo hacerlo. El sonido de mi teléfono celular me ayudó a tomar mi decisión. Ion, solo quería avisarte de que todo se ha arreglado. Ahora voy a bajar para encontrarme con algunas personas y cenar. No olvidaste nada, ¿verdad? No, todo está bien. Tengo todo en mi habitación para mañana. ¿Necesitas algo? No, Ion, relájate. Voy a apagar mi teléfono. Te llamaré mañana por la mañana. ¿De acuerdo? Ríe, diviértete. No es divertido, Ion, es trabajo. No parecía estar demasiado fuera de lugar. El vestíbulo, el restaurante y las salas de conferencias estaban llenos de gente, así que pude pasar desapercibido. Había un folleto pequeño y bonito que mostraba el diseño de todas las habitaciones del hotel. Me paseé por las diferentes habitaciones y me detuve en las paredes, mirando alrededor entre la multitud. No tenía ni idea de qué haría si Sara me veía. Lo averiguaría si y cuando eso sucediera. Encontré un tablero de eventos que enumeraba todas las habitaciones que estaban siendo utilizadas por los diversos grupos. Bixler Enterprises no tenía habitaciones disponibles para el miércoles por la noche. Esto me pareció interesante. Sara había dicho que no iba a salir del hotel, pero ahora no estaba tan seguro de eso. Había 3 comedores, familiar, informal y de alta cocina. A Sara no le gustaba mucho cenar con niños, así que fui primero al comedor informal. Solo me llevó 5 minutos asegurarme de que no estaba allí. Tuve mejor suerte en el salón gourmet, era una acogedora mesita encajada en la esquina, el tipo de mesa que la gente reserva para tener un encuentro privado. Sara llevaba un vestido de cóctel negro con un escote pronunciado y perlas, se veía elegante y su acompañante parecía apreciarlo. Conocía a algunas personas con las que trabajaba Sara y él no era una de ellas. Me resultaba familiar, pero no había forma de que pudiera recordarlo. Había muchas sillas libres, así que no tuve problemas para cruzar la sala. Había velas y pequeños candelabros de cristal en las mesas. Apagué la mía y le dije al camarero que me molestaba por el glaucoma. Pedí el plato de pollo de siempre y me acomodé. El camarero me sirvió el café por tercera vez. Disculpe, el tipo en la mesa de enfrente me parece muy familiar. ¿Sabes quién es? Sí, ese es Malcolm Eugene Foote. Es miembro del Consejo Municipal, se espera que se postule para el Congreso en los próximos años. ¿Es esa su esposa con él? Es muy bonita. No, esta es la primera vez que la veo. Siempre usa esa mesa para señoras especiales, si me entiende. Simplemente le sonreí y pedí la cuenta. Nunca había visto a Sara tan sensual con un hombre antes. Parecía captar cada palabra que decía, como si fuera Dios o algo así. No estaban haciendo nada inapropiado, pero tampoco era platónico ni profesional. Cuando me fui, estaban terminando su segunda botella de vino. Ahora entendía por qué se había llevado su lencería elegante. Me acomodé en una esquina del vestíbulo para que no me vieran. 10 minutos después, salieron del restaurante. Ella le tomaba la mano mientras caminaban por el vestíbulo hacia el ascensor. Observé cuidadosamente los indicadores de piso. Que el ascensor se detuviera en el tercer piso era una buena señal, significaba que no lo había llevado a su habitación. Era una mala señal cuando el ascensor no llegaba al 7º piso, significaba que ella fue a su habitación. Por si acaso me equivocaba en algo, me senté en el vestíbulo y observé el ascensor durante 1 hora. La gente entraba y salía, pero Sara no estaba entre ellos. Saqué mi maleta vacía del coche y me dirigí al mostrador de recepción. Aunque podía demostrar que era su esposo, me costó trabajo conseguir una tarjeta llave. Se dieron después de llamar a la habitación, pero nadie respondió. Finalmente, estaba en camino a la habitación 714 con la tarjeta llave. Ni siquiera encendí las luces al principio, simplemente me senté en la oscuridad de la habitación durante más de una hora. No fue difícil asegurarme de que no regresara a la habitación. Primero, empacé todas sus ropas y pertenencias personales. No dejé nada atrás. Revisé el paquete de Preven, todavía quedaban 10 pastillas en el tocador. De manera muy ordenada, estaban todos los artículos que necesitaría para su presentación al día siguiente. Comencé a llenar la maleta. Había 24 carpetas promocionales especialmente encuadernadas y otras 20 carpetas regulares, todas ellas fueron a la maleta. Un proyector digital fue lo siguiente, seguido de una computadora portátil. Tomé su bolso y su celular, que había dejado en la habitación. Todo lo que tenía consigo era un bolso de mano y probablemente un tubo de lápiz labial. Di una vuelta por la habitación tan cuidadosamente como lo hizo ella para asegurarme de no perder nada. Una vez satisfecho, dejé las llaves del coche y mi anillo de bodas en el tocador. Aparte de esos dos objetos, la habitación estaba completamente vacía. El ascensor se dirigió directamente al estacionamiento, no tuve problemas para llevar 2 maletas, y 20 minutos después, estaba en la autopista rumbo al norte. Pasaban las 3 de la madrugada, no tenía idea de que había pasado tanto tiempo. 1 hora o 2 después, sonó mi teléfono celular, la identificación de llamadas mostraba el número del Listen. ¿Ion? Sí, ¿dónde estás? Estaré en casa pronto. Eso fue todo lo que dije. Hubo silencio en el otro extremo de la línea. Los vendedores tienen un viejo dicho, el primero que habla pierde. Pareció una eternidad antes de que ella hablara. Ion, lo siento. No preguntó nada y simplemente colgó. Apagué mi teléfono, era obvio que había regresado a su habitación. Más tarde ese día, tenía que dar una presentación que salvaría a su empresa y le daría un ascenso. Metí las maletas en el desván del garaje. Sara nunca iba allí y nunca pensó en buscar algo allí. Por supuesto, en este punto, estoy bastante seguro de que no importaba. Primero, recogí todas mis ropas y pertenencias personales. La mayoría de los hombres tienen sus propias herramientas, generalmente es un requisito para el trabajo. Pasé por la tienda, cargué las mías en el Subaru y recogí mi último cheque de pago. Para entonces, los bancos ya estaban abiertos, no tuve que hacer ninguna manipulación financiera complicada. Simplemente retiré todo el dinero de mis cuentas. Almorcé en Hagerstown, Maryland. Tenía suficiente dinero para vivir durante unos años, pero sabía que estaría buscando trabajo muy pronto. Sara y yo éramos parecidos en eso de que a ambos nos encantaba trabajar. La voy a extrañar. Pasé un par de horas en las cuevas del Uray y alquilé una habitación cerca de Whitewell. No tenía idea de qué iba a hacer. Era sábado, y me encontré sentado en el acuario de Chattanooga, observando la naturaleza que nunca había visto antes. Pasé unas horas simplemente relajándome y decidí que era un buen lugar para estar. Compré un pase anual para el acuario y, para la hora de la cena, tenía un lugar donde quedarme. Era un remolque móvil en el parque, pero estaba amueblado y era económico. No necesitaba mucho. La primera cosa que haría el lunes por la mañana sería conseguir un trabajo. Un buen hombre de mantenimiento siempre puede conseguir un trabajo, especialmente si está dispuesto a trabajar duro. Podría permanecer discreto hasta que fuera el momento de renovar mi licencia de conducir o las etiquetas del coche. Me preocuparé por eso cuando llegue el momento. El domingo por la tarde, llamé a Gloria. Me sentí obligado a informarle sobre lo que estaba sucediendo, pero Sara ya se lo había contado. Fue bastante franca con Gloria sobre lo que había pasado. Dijo que había engañado, que la sorprendí, que me fui y que ella perdió su trabajo. Me sentí mal porque ella perdió su trabajo, pero ese era el precio que tenía que pagar. Le pedí a Gloria que le dijera a Josh lo que estaba sucediendo la próxima vez que hablara con él. También le dije que la llamaría aproximadamente una vez al mes para verificar cómo iban las cosas. No le dije dónde estaba. Para el mediodía del día siguiente, tenía un trabajo. En realidad, estaba a poca distancia del parque de remolques, con el Waffle House a mitad de camino. ¿Qué más podría querer un hombre? No sé cómo manejaron el papeleo, pero me estaban pagando $20 por hora sin hacer preguntas. Estaba feliz, y ellos también. Ni siquiera tendría que tocar el dinero que traje conmigo. Unos 2 meses después, Gloria me informó que Sara se había mudado de la casa y estaba viviendo con sus padres. Gloria no sabía nada más, pero estaba feliz de que estuviera estable y le estuviera yendo bien. Josh me llamó desde San Diego solo para informarme que iba a hacer un crucero. Era técnico en aviónica en un portaaviones, intentó explicar qué hacía exactamente, pero estaba más allá de mi comprensión. Nunca supe mucho sobre cosas técnicas. Ambos tuvieron cuidado de no decir nada malo sobre su madre, aprecié eso. Después de eso, todo siguió como siempre. Comencé a hablar con Gloria al menos semanalmente, Josh y yo comenzamos a enviar correos electrónicos regularmente. Gloria hablaba regularmente con Sara, pero decía muy poco sobre lo que estaba haciendo o dónde estaba. Nunca presenté la solicitud de divorcio, y parece que Sara tampoco lo hizo. Tengo una licencia de conducir de Tennessee y las etiquetas en el Subaru. Comencé a frecuentar un bar local un par de veces al mes y tuve encuentros casuales, 2 mujeres se alternaban como mis compañeras nocturnas regulares. No buscaban compromisos, y yo tampoco, parecía funcionar bien para todos nosotros. La vida era buena. Eso fue hace mucho tiempo, y gradualmente olvidé a Sara. Con el tiempo, el Subaru comenzó a darme problemas, había olvidado cuánto tiempo había pasado. Tenía más de 200,000 millas. Estaba reflexionando sobre esto con una jarra de cerveza un día cuando me di cuenta de que habían pasado casi 5 años desde que me fui de casa. Mantuve un contacto cercano con ambos hijos, Gloria ya tenía 2 hijos propios en este momento y quería que los visitara. Josh casi se casó con una mujer tailandesa, pero en el último momento, se negó. Por lo general, trabajaba 6 días a la semana y usaba el domingo para recuperarme del sábado por la noche, no había ninguna buena razón para que alguien llamara a la puerta de mi remolque a las 6 de la mañana de un viernes. Su grosería fue recompensada por un hombre medio desnudo abriendo la puerta, los calzoncillos del día son repugnantes, y la dama en la puerta, juzgando por la expresión en su rostro, estuvo de acuerdo conmigo. Ella apartó la mirada, pero su compañero no parecía impresionado. Norm habría usado pantalones, pero en un momento como este, los invitados me molestaron. Estamos buscando a John Terrell. No los conozco. Me llamo David Simmons, y esta es mi esposa Mara. Tenemos un problema y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Lo siento mucho, no trabajo a altas horas de la noche. Si necesitan algo relacionado con su auto, tendrán que ir a la tienda. Esto provocó varias miradas en blanco y finalmente una respuesta. No tiene nada que ver con tu trabajo, es más un problema personal. ¿Podemos entrar? El interior del remolque lucía desordenado, rara vez tenía invitados, así que rara vez lo limpiaba. Incluso mis novias insistían en que fuéramos a su lugar. Hagan como en su casa, déjenme ponerme los pantalones enseguida. Al entrar en el dormitorio, dejé la puerta abierta solo para mostrarles lo hospitalario que soy. También me puse una camisa. ¿Les gustaría tomar café? Solo tomará unos 10 minutos. Aparté algunas cosas del sofá para que pudieran sentarse, no hubo respuesta a la pregunta del café. Tenemos una hija adoptiva de 4 años y otra de 2 que necesita un trasplante de médula ósea, y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Estamos dispuestos a pagarte si es necesario. ¿Con mi médula ósea? No, queremos usarla y estamos dispuestos a compensarte por cualquier inconveniente. Creo que quieren comprarla. Estaba actuando como un listillo, y de repente me di cuenta de ello. Estas personas eran serias, tenían un problema real y estaban buscando ayuda. Lo siento mucho, no quise interrumpir. Por favor, continúen. Nuestra mejor oportunidad de encontrar un donante es un familiar cercano. Eres nuestra mejor esperanza. Mira esto. No quiero ser un grosero, pero creo que se equivocaron de persona. ¿Cuándo nació su hija? Cumplirá 5 años en julio. Marge Simmons habló por primera vez, y sonó sincera. Odio ser el portador de malas noticias, pero me hice una vasectomía hace 15 años. No hay forma de que pueda ser su padre. ¿Por qué tu nombre estaba en el certificado de nacimiento? No puedo responder eso, tal vez deberían preguntarle a su madre. Esa afirmación fue recibida con silencio. Sentí pena por estas personas, pero no sabía cómo ayudarles. ¿Cuál es el nombre de la madre? Sarah Lise Terrell. No encontraba las palabras. Tal vez no debería haber tomado esas malditas pastillas de ella, por supuesto, entonces esas personas no tendrían una hija en absoluto. Todo lo que pensaba que había superado el dolor, y aquí está de nuevo, viejos recuerdos de mi esposa teniendo relaciones sexuales con ese maldito político de Filadelfia. Estaba empezando a olvidarlo todo, y ahora estaba de vuelta. Maldita sea. Ahora entiendo y pido disculpas por mi grosería e insensibilidad. Haré todo lo que esté en mi poder para ayudarles. En primer lugar, porque no puede Sara hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Médicamente, no puede. ¿Por qué no? Es madre, tiene que ser una donante adecuada. Ella es una donante adecuada, pero está demasiado enferma. Los médicos se negaron siquiera a considerar utilizarla. ¿Enferma de qué? Está muriendo de insuficiencia hepática. Le quedan menos de 6 meses de vida. Esto no tiene sentido. Siempre ha estado perfectamente sana. Además, no creo que un hígado enfermo le impida donar médula ósea. El hospital no aceptará su firma en el formulario de consentimiento. ¿Estás diciendo que hay algo mal en su cabeza? Ambos me miraron en silencio, sabían la respuesta, pero no querían decirlo. En ese momento, no quería que se sintieran aún más incómodos. Hace 10 minutos, no me importaban, pero ahora sentía que tenía que protegerlos y ayudarlos. ¿Cómo sucedió esto? ¿Podría alguno de mis hijos ayudar? Quizás, pero pensamos que eras nuestra mejor esperanza. ¿Por qué no van tras su padre, su verdadero padre? Pensamos que eras tú. No tenemos ni idea de quién más podría ser. Sara no nos dijo nada sobre otro posible padre. De hecho, ella no estaba en condiciones de explicar nada, agregó Mara. Obtuvimos la mayoría de nuestra información de la agencia de adopción. Tuve que preparar café y hacer pis, permítanme un momento. Dejé a mis invitados sentados mientras preparaba el café. Solo tomó unos minutos. Mientras se preparaba, fui al baño, algo que necesitaba hacer urgentemente. Traté de ser discreto, ya había avergonzado lo suficiente a Mara. ¿Dónde viven? En Westchester, Pensilvania. Les haré una oferta. Si les digo quién es el verdadero padre de su hija, deben prometerme que lo perseguirán sin descanso hasta obtener lo que desean. ¿De qué estás hablando? El padre de su hija es un político prominente en Pensilvania. Por supuesto, negará todo y probablemente les proporcionará documentos legales para detener sus esfuerzos. Si acuerdan presionar lo suficiente para que él admita que la niña es suya, podrán avergonzarlo y obligarlo a hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Eso es lo que quieren, ¿verdad? Sí, claro, pero ¿cómo hacemos eso? No lo sé. Soy mecánico. Trabajo con metal para ganarme la vida. Creo que la mejor manera sería utilizar la televisión, la radio y los periódicos. Los políticos harán cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. ¿Tienen amigos que puedan ayudar? Bueno, ahora ambos estaban sonriendo. Debo haber dicho algo que les dio esperanza. Creo que podemos hacer esto. ¿Quién demonios es él? Malcolm Eugene Foote. Se postula para el Senado de los Estados Unidos. Apuesto a que hará cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. El café estaba listo, pero David y Marshall no podían esperar para llegar a casa. Antes de irse, les dije cómo ponerse en contacto con Gloria y Josh en caso de que los necesitaran. Estaba seguro de que ayudarían. También les pedí que me dijeran dónde estaba Sarah. Probablemente estaría en Pensacola antes de que ellos regresaran a Westchester. Me corté el pelo y compré una camisa nueva. Sarah era una tramposa que arruinó mi vida, pero aún así quería lucir bien cuando la viera. Era otro remolque, pero esta vez era un bonito doble nuevo. Allí estaba su Volvo con una llanta desinflada y un parabrisas roto. La mujer que abrió la puerta no era Sarah, parecía que la habían empapado fuerte y la habían dejado empapada. Tenía al menos 45, tal vez 50, y debió haber tenido una vida difícil. La falta de maquillaje no ayudaba, y simplemente se veía horrible. No tuve la oportunidad de abrir la boca. Caray, si no es John Terrell. Nunca esperé verte aquí. Tuve que usar la vieja línea, me estás poniendo en desventaja. Sherry Hart. Pasa, entra. ¿Quieres una cerveza? No, pero gracias. Estoy aquí para ver a Sarah. Sherry cruzó la habitación y se detuvo en el buffet del comedor. Aquí está, John. Mírala todo lo que quieras. Su mano señalaba una urna de latón que estaba en el centro del buffet vacío. Supongo que llegué demasiado tarde. No me moví, solo me quedé mirando el contenedor frente a mí. ¿Puedo tomar una cerveza ahora? Sarah se mudó a Pensacola después de dar a su bebé en adopción. Compró el remolque con el dinero que recibió de Bixler Enterprises después de que la despidieron. Tenía una participación en las ganancias, 401k, y vacaciones y días de enfermedad. Eventualmente, consiguió un trabajo en una fábrica local de prendas de vestir donde trabajaba en el departamento de envíos. Allí fue donde conoció a Sherry. Sherry alquilaba una habitación de Sarah. Cada centavo que Sarah ganaba iba para el alcohol. Empezó con vino y gradualmente pasó a bebidas más fuertes, las más baratas. Eventualmente, perdió su trabajo debido a su alcoholismo y se vio obligada a usar sus ahorros. Nunca salió con nadie ni salió a ningún lado. Sherry se quedó con ella, pagó sus servicios públicos y compró alimentos que Sarah no comía. Le llevó más de 3 años quitarse la vida. Increíblemente, ella tenía un testamento y me dejó un doble remolque y un Volvo. Sherry explicó que Sarah estaba tan angustiada por lo que había hecho que simplemente se rindió. No intentó evitar el embarazo ni siquiera terminarlo. La adopción se había arreglado meses antes de que naciera el bebé. Nunca volvió a trabajar, excepto en los trabajos clandestinos que hacía mal. Sherry dijo que Sarah no parecía tener ambición ni propósito en la vida. Sarah hablaba mucho de mí pero tenía miedo de intentar contactarme. Gloria le dio mi número, pero nunca me llamó. Era como si su aventura de una noche la hubiera lastimado más a ella que a mí. Estuve allí durante 2 semanas y luego vendí el remolque de Sherry por $1 y obtuve $3,000 por el Volvo. 2 días después, estaba en Westchester visitando a mis nuevos amigos David y Marshall. Malcolm Eugene Foot resistió al principio, pero David y Marshall lo presionaron hasta que cedió. Insistió en pruebas de ADN, que demostraron que era el padre. Para salvar la cara, más o menos lo obligaron a someterse a un trasplante de médula ósea, que fue exitoso. La carrera política y la vida familiar de Malcolm no dejaron una impresión favorable. Su caída en las encuestas fue tan rápida que el partido lo reemplazó por otro candidato unos meses antes de las elecciones. Su esposa solicitó el divorcio y fue muy pública al respecto. Sarah y yo estamos viajando ahora a Dallas para ver a Gloria y a mis nietos. No sé cuánto tiempo mantendré a Sarah conmigo, probablemente hasta que tenga a alguien.